The classroom went silent as the teacher slammed Amara's test on her desk. "You people aren't built for math," he sneered, loud enough for every student to hear. Her hands trembled, but then her eyes shifted, sharp, unyielding. What no one knew was that the problem he mocked her for was one NASA itself hadn't solved. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The fluorescent lights hummed over room 2114, flattening everything into the hard shine of a hospital corridor. Dry erase marker squeaked against the whiteboard as Mr. Whitaker slashed a limit problem across it, his blocky handwriting chewing through symbols like they'd done him wrong. "Pop quiz thinking, not feelings," he said, already annoyed, already daring anyone to look uncertain. Desks scraped, backpacks sighed. Amara Johnson, 15, sat in the second row from the windows, braids tucked behind one ear, pencil between steady fingers. She tracked every symbol when he pivoted, eyes settling on her like she'd volunteered. The room slowed. "Johnson," he said, "stand and work it. Your kind don't do math." The silence had edges. Heat rose in Amara's face, but her posture didn't break. She stood, palms skimming her thighs to wipe away the sweat. There were 28 witnesses, sneakers half-tied, heads bowed over cracked phones, the too loud clock near the door. She could feel their attention the way a stage feels the glare of the house lights, blunt, unforgiving. As she began, voice small then firming, "The function's piecewise. The left-hand limit won't match the right if..." A boy in a Nike hoodie snorted. Mr. Whitaker's mouth tipped into a lazy smirk. "Interesting approach," he said, tasting the word like a lemon. "But we're solving, not guessing." 2 rows back, Parker Caldwell, perfect hair, varsity warm-up jacket, the kind of GPA that comes with a parking spot, leaned back in his chair and folded his arms. "Coach says precision wins," he murmured, just loud enough. A few kids laughed without meaning to. It wasn't the first time the room tipped like this. Casual meanness sliding across the tile. It was just the clearest. Whitaker tapped the board. "Let's assist Miss Johnson with a reminder. Functions obey rules. When you know the rules, the answers appear. When you don't," he let the sentence hang. Amara's fingers tightened around the pencil. The graphite left a crescent on her thumb. She had studied this. She could do this. She stepped closer to the board. Up close, she saw tiny blue ghosts of erased problems beneath the new one, like old mistakes refusing to die. Her eyes traced the definition of the function on the left. A rational expression simplified, then miscopied. She saw it the way some people hear harmony. "Sir," she said, "careful, your numerator's missing a negative. If you factor properly the discontinuity." Whitaker's brows lifted in theatrical surprise. "We're correcting the problem now?" He didn't check. He moved his marker anyway, doubling down on the wrong path with the easy certainty of someone who has never been made to turn around. Near the windows, Jules Park, quiet grade-level art kid, who kept a sketchbook under his desk, pulled the spiral bound closer and began to draw. He never drew during Whitaker's class. The man could smell graphite from 50 feet, but he sketched Amara's profile in quick, messy lines. Jaw set, eyes direct. Somewhere near the door, Leah Corbett, a student teacher from the university, pretended to organize a stack of worksheets while trying to memorize the room's geography of fear. She had an evaluation form tucked into a folder, boxes for classroom management, content knowledge, professional tone. There was no box for what she'd just heard. "Let's do this properly," Whitaker said, shoulders squaring as if there were cameras. "Parker, why don't you show Miss Johnson how it's done?" Parker stood without looking at her, took the marker, and walked into the whiteboard glow, like he'd been born under it. He wrote fast, confidently expanding a factor that didn't expand. He canceled terms that weren't allowed to cancel. When he finished, the class exhaled. The board delivered the answer like a verdict. "Clean," Whitaker said, satisfied. Observe the difference between confidence and confusion. Amara watched Parker's final line and felt a clear, thin thread of certainty tighten in her chest. His answer contradicted the definition. She wasn't confused. She was right. "Sir," she said again, and her voice didn't wobble this time. "If you plug in values approaching from the left, you get a different behavior than from the right. Look." She pointed to the piece where the sign error lived. She kept her tone even, respectful in the way she'd taught herself to be to adults who didn't expect respect back. "The function folds differently around 0 if the numerator is negative. The limit doesn't exist. The room registered that phrase like a weather change. A few heads tilted. The boy in the Nike hoodie stopped grinning. Whitaker's eyes cooled. "We're not here to perform," he said. "You can take your seat." He didn't correct the board. Phones, half hidden, flickered to life. Devin Marshall, who sat near the outlet because his battery was always at 12%, slid open a browser and typed the problem into a search bar. The first result, an online math forum, showed a clean solution with a different sign in the numerator. He blinked. Then he glanced up at the board, down at his screen, up at Parker's mistake. He lifted the phone's camera and shot a photo, the shutter sound silenced by practice. Not dramatic, not a plan, just a reflex to capture something that didn't make sense. Jules kept drawing. Leah wrote a small furious sentence in the margin of her evaluation form, and underlined it twice. "Pop quiz," at the end of the period, Whitaker announced, as if nothing had happened. 5 questions. No notes. If you can read, you can pass. He let his gaze skim over Amara again. A quick, surgical flick. "Some of you should use the next 20 minutes wisely." He distributed worksheets like a man dealing cards he already knew the order of. Amara sat, heart hammering. She stared at the example problems, all of them cousins of the one on the board. Her pencil moved. She anchored herself to rules she had learned at 1 a.m. While her mother's shoes dried by the vent. Check both sides. Factor truthfully. Don't be bullied by algebra that wants to be easy. The room settled into the shallow silence of controlled work time. Whispers traded under breath. Pages turning. Someone's bracelet clinking each time they shifted. Outside the windows, the parking lot shone wet. Last night's rain hadn't finished evaporating. The clock trudged forward. Amara's pencil didn't hesitate. She wrote small and careful, lining each step like it might be challenged in a court of law. Sometimes she heard her mother's voice, half sermon, half lullaby, telling her there are rooms you enter already guilty, and you must leave with your head high anyway. Sometimes she heard Ma's laugh lifting the ceiling. Now she heard only the scratch of graphite and Mr. Whitaker's shoes pacing. With 6 minutes left, Whitaker clapped once. The sound flinched the class awake. "Quizzes now," he said, moving like he was under a stopwatch. Papers traded hands, the room's rhythm stumbling into quick compliance. When he reached Amara's desk, he paused just long enough for her to feel the pause. "Name," he said. She wrote it. He slid the corner of the paper against the desk edge, until it curled. "Legible," he added. "Show all work. If I can't follow your thinking, it doesn't count." He moved on. The instructions didn't need the smirk, but the smirk came anyway. The questions mirrored the error from the board, like a bad echo. Amara caught the trap immediately. She wrote her solutions in a clear column. No shortcuts, arrows guiding the eye. On question 3, the limit's existence hinged on a sign. The same sign that had been miscup high. She circled the condition and wrote a one-sentence justification beneath it. Different approach values, different behavior, no single limit. When she finished, there were 2 minutes on the clock. She checked again. She could hear Parker whispering to the kid next to him, a low hiss asking for an eraser. She could smell the marker, the rain, the sharp scent of nerve. "Time," Whitaker said. He collected the quizzes with a speed that suggested mercy would be expensive. At the front, he fanned them once, theatrically. He set them aside without looking and turned back to the board, as if the last 40 minutes hadn't happened. "Homework," he said. 5 through 15. Odd. If you get stuck, check the examples I worked today. The bell was still a minute away, but he dismissed his own class with a casual, "That's it." Chairs scraped. The brittle clatter of zippers. Amara slid her notebook into her backpack and stood. When she did, Jules's sketch slid off his desk and skittered under hers. She crouched, picked it up, and saw her own face rendered in quick, sure lines. Not small, not confused, focused, with a light in the eyes. Jules reached for it, embarrassed. "Sorry," he said, voice barely there. It got away. She held it a second longer than politeness demanded. Something in it steadied her. "It's good," she said. He flushed, nodded, and tucked it between algebra notes. Devin drifted closer, phone cupped in his palm. He didn't say anything, just tilted the screen so she could see the snapshot board. Parker's wrong answer. Search result below it showing the correct sign. He raised both eyebrows like a question, and then, without waiting, slid into the flow of bodies moving for the door. Leah hovered near the front, indecision rooting her feet, then finally approached Whitaker's desk. "About the earlier comment," she started. He lifted a hand. "We'll debrief later," he said, crisp final. At the threshold, Mr. Whitaker blocked Amara with a gentle arm. "The way you might block a doorway for a draft. Miss Johnson." His voice carried the fake softness of a pillow that hides a brick. A word. Parker slipped by, eyes fixed on the hall. Kids flowed around them. The hallway roar rose and fell. "Your quiz," Whitaker said, tapping the stack, "will be graded with special attention. When students attempt to undermine instruction, it's important to maintain standards." He smiled without teeth. "Consider it a learning moment." He slid a pink slip onto the corner of his desk. "Detention request, subject line blank. Also, you spoke out of turn. Tomorrow, 15 minutes after school." For a heartbeat, Amara saw the whole chain. The slip, the empty room, the message the detention would send to classmates who needed her to be small. She tasted copper. She thought of the problem's sign, how the wrong mark had flipped everything. Her throat tight. She picked up the slip, the paper warm from his palm, and held it like evidence. "Understood," she said. She turned toward the door. On the whiteboard, the wrong answer still glowed, stubborn under the lights. Leah watched her go, mouth pressed into a line, then looked at Whitaker and looked away. Jules folded his sketchbook. Devon's phone was already in his pocket, video set to auto-upload when the Wi-Fi caught. In the hallway, the bell finally freed the building. Kids poured past, laughter snapping back like rubber bands. Amara stood in the current and did not let it move her. The sting behind her eyes burned and then cooled. She pressed the detention slip flat against her notebook, slid both into her backpack with hands that did not shake, and lifted her chin. Somewhere inside, something crystalline formed, a decision with edges. She would check the textbook after dinner. She would solve every problem until the logic felt like breath. She would take whatever this man tried to hand her and turn it into fuel. She swallowed her tears, and in the quiet that followed, something in her eyes hardened. She silently vowed she'd prove him wrong, even as down the hall, a door opened, and a voice called her name from a place she didn't expect. Amara walked home from school with her headphones hanging limp around her neck. The world outside moving like scenery on a conveyor belt. Houses slouched in neat rows along Cedar Street, each one carrying the same sagging porch, the same tired paint, peeled by years of small-town weather. Her backpack straps cut into her shoulders, heavier than usual, not because of the books inside but because of the weight of Whitaker's words, replaying in her head. "Your kind don't do math." She wanted to tear the memory out, crumple it, burn it, but it clung stubbornly, echoing like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. When she reached the apartment complex, 2 stories of cracked brick and weary windows, she spotted her mother's car in the lot, a dented Honda with a bumper sticker that read, "Proud to be a nurse." Its tires looked worn, its paint dull. Inside, the living room lights glowed warm. But Amara knew better. That light wasn't comfort. It was survival. Her mother, Denise Johnson, always left them on so Amara wouldn't come home to a place that felt dark and empty. Denise stood in the kitchen, still in scrubs, hair pulled into a bun, exhaustion painted under her eyes. She was stacking mail on the counter when Amara walked in. "Hey baby," she said with a smile that tried to reach her eyes. "How was school?" Amara hesitated, toeing off her sneakers. "It was school." Denise gave her the look, mother's reserve for half-truths. "That bad, huh?" Amara dropped her backpack on the couch and collapsed beside it. "Mom, do you ever feel like no matter how hard you try, people already decided what you're worth?" Denise leaned against the counter studying her daughter with a mix of worry and patience. "What happened?" Amara opened her mouth, then shut it. She couldn't bring herself to repeat Whitaker's words. Saying them aloud would give them more power. Let them echo outside her head. Instead, she just whispered, "He thinks I don't belong." Denise's face softened, but her voice was steady. "People like that have been telling folks like us we don't belong since the day we set foot in this country. That doesn't make it true." "I want to prove him wrong," Amara said, her voice trembling with a rawness she hadn't expected to reveal. "I want to be someone so good, so undeniable, that no one can say I don't belong." Denise crossed the kitchen, crouched beside the couch, and took her daughter's hands. "Baby, you are already more than enough. You don't have to prove yourself to anyone." "But I do," Amara insisted. "I don't want to just pass. I don't want to just get by. I want to work at NASA one day, Mom. I want to be the person they call when the smartest people in the room are stuck." Denise's breath caught. There it was again, the dream Amara had been clinging to since she was 9 years old. When she first read about Katherine Johnson, The black mathematician whose calculations sent astronauts into space. At the time, Amara had written her name in the margins of every notebook, underlining it twice. Katherine Johnson. Like me. Denise brushed her thumb against Amara's knuckles. I love how big your dreams are, but baby, NASA? That's a long road. And in this town, with this school system, her voice trailed off. She wasn't trying to crush her daughter's dream, just cushion it with reality. Amara pulled her hands back, fire flickering in her chest. So what? I'm supposed to shrink my dreams down, until they fit this town, until they fit Whitaker's version of me. Denise sighed, exhaustion threading her words. I just don't want you to get hurt chasing something the world is designed to keep from you. Being smart is one thing, but being seen as smart when you look like us, that's another battle altogether. Amara stood, pacing the small living room, her voice steadying with every step. Then I'll fight both battles. The math one and the one that says I can't. Someone has to. Denise watched her daughter's back straighten, her eyes sharpen, and something inside her shifted. She recognized that look. It was the same one she'd had when she decided to raise Amara alone, working double shifts in an unforgiving world. A look that said, even if the odds laugh in my face, I'm still showing up. All right, Denise said softly. Then fight it. But promise me you'll do it smart. Don't let them see you break. Ever. Amara nodded. She didn't trust her voice to speak. Later that night, after Denise had left for her second shift, Amara sat at the small dining table with her math book open, a lamp casting a yellow cone of light across the pages. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the distance, then faded. Amara's pencil moved furiously. Each problem she solved was another stone in the foundation of the future she imagined. White walls, NASA badges, screens filled with data only she could decipher. But as the hours passed, her mind kept circling back to the humiliation of the day. She pictured Whitaker's smirk, Parker's false confidence, the laughter that had pierced her. She whispered under her breath, "Your kind don't do math," and then pressed her pencil harder, rewriting the inequality, solving until the graphite tore the page. She wanted more than homework problems. She needed something bigger to conquer, something that would shout back louder than Whitaker's insult. The next afternoon, with a study hall period to spare, Amara wandered into the school library. The space was old, shelves leaning with age, but it smelled of paper and dust, the scent of possibility. She browsed half-heartedly, running her fingers along cracked spines, until something caught her eye. On the far wall, tucked beneath a sagging corkboard, was a stack of flyers so old their edges had curled yellow. She pulled one free, brushing off dust. Statewide mathematics competition. Registration open. The date was from 3 years ago, but the image students hunched over desks, trophies gleaming, snapped something alive inside her. If there had been competitions then, there had to be one now. She just had to find it. Her pulse quickened. A math competition wasn't just practice. It was a stage, a chance to prove that what Whitaker dismissed as impossible was her strength. She could stand in front of judges, in front of students from every corner of the state, and show them all. She folded the flyer carefully, sliding it into her notebook like a secret weapon. As she left the library, the old floorboards creaked beneath her sneakers, and for the first time since Whitaker's words, her chest felt lighter. Revenge wasn't the word she'd use, but justice. Justice would do. That night, Amara sat at the dining table again, her notebook open, the flyer spread beside it. The paper was brittle, but the idea inside it was sharp, electric. She traced the words mathematics competition with her finger, whispering them aloud. This is it, she said to herself. This is how I prove him wrong. Outside, the wind rattled the window panes. Inside, Amara leaned closer to the page, her breath steady. The flyer had been waiting for her, buried in dust, forgotten by everyone else. But to her it was a sign. What she didn't know was that hidden in that discovery was a chain reaction, one that would drag her from quiet humiliation into a storm of attention she could never have predicted. Because somewhere across town, a name was already being written on this year's registration list. And that name was hers. Only she hadn't written it. Amara folds the flyer with trembling hands, unaware that someone has already entered her into the competition without her knowledge. It started as a murmur in the hallway, and grew teeth by lunch. By 7th period, the words "too dumb for math" had shed their quotation marks and wrapped themselves around Amara's name like a sticker no one could peel off. Phones tilted away when she passed. Laughter hiccuped, and then went flat, a sound that said we were just talking about you. The insult that had landed hard in room 214 had slipped its leash and was now sprinting through the school, collecting. Devin hadn't meant to feed it. He'd uploaded a photo of the board from his seat, Parker's wrong answer still shining under the fluorescent lights, next to a screenshot from a math forum showing the corrected sign. His caption had been mild. "Check your signs, y'all." But an hour later, a cropped version of the image surfaced on a burner account called Add Cedar Spills. Parker's wrong work filling the frame while a red circle singled out the line where Amara had pointed. The caption read, "When you argue with the teacher but still don't get it." The comments sprouted like weeds. "She really tried it, lol. Not her playing Einstein. Stay in your lane." At her locker, Amara found two girls she barely knew, suddenly fascinated with the seam in the floor. One of them grinned without warmth. "Hey, aren't you the limit girl?" she asked, like it was a compliment she'd ordered custom. The other added, "No shade, but maybe don't correct teachers in public if you're not sure." Amara kept her face neutral. "I was sure." The girl shrugged. "Okay, but the internet says otherwise," as if the internet were a weather report, and Amara had dared bring sunshine into rain. Down the hall, Jules hovered with his sketchbook pressed to his chest. "It's not true," he told her, voice low. "The sign was wrong. I checked." His eyes darted toward a knot of boys by the staircase, Parker among them, laughing like a soundtrack. People just like jokes more than corrections. Amara swallowed. "It'll pass." She didn't believe it. Things like this didn't pass. They settled. They became the story people told about you when they forgot your middle name. The intercom crackled during third period and delivered the principal's voice, bland as a poured drink. "A reminder about our digital citizenship policy. Posts that mock or demean other students are unacceptable. Think before you post." There was a pause then. "Also, congratulations to our varsity basketball team on last night's win." The class smirked. Everyone understood which part applied to whom. "They're totally talking about you," the boy in the Nike hoodie whispered. He looked delighted by his own accuracy. In the doorway after class, Leah, the student teacher, tried to intercept Amara. "Do you have a second?" she asked, eyes anxious. What happened yesterday? It wasn't okay." The apology felt fragile. Amara adjusted the strap of her backpack. "Thanks." Leah's throat worked. "If you want to file a report, I can. It'll just make it louder," Amara said. "Louder's not always bad," Leah offered. "Sometimes it's how people hear. Sometimes it's how they enjoy it," Amara answered, and walked away before the apology wilted further. The guidance office smelled like lemon cleaner, and a particular kind of optimism. Miss Kincaid beckoned her in, with manicured fingers. "Amara, sit." She tilted her head in that "I'm listening" way that suggests the listening is mostly for show. "I saw some of the online chatter." She softened the word into something that wouldn't stain her mouth. "I wanted to check in. Stress can cloud performance, and accelerated math isn't for everyone." Amara stiffened. "I'm passing." "But barely," Miss Kincaid said, tapping a printout. "No shame in finding a better fit. We could move you to Algebra 2 regular. Give you space to shine elsewhere." She slid the form forward like a solution. "Be realistic," she added, gentle, deadly. "Realistic like Parker's answer?" Amara asked, eyes on the form. Miss Kincaid blinked. "I don't follow." "Of course," Amara said quietly, and stood. "Thank you for your time." She left the form on the desk face down. In the cafeteria, someone had already minted a meme, a pixelated limit sign from the road manual, placed over a cartoon girl's head, with the caption "Know Your Limits." It ricocheted through group chats with the efficiency of an alarm. Parker strolled past her table with his tray balanced in one hand, voice pitched carry. "No hard feelings," he said brightly, not stopping. "Just the game." A smaller boy at his elbow murmured, "What game?" Parker didn't answer. "You don't have to pretend it doesn't hurt," Jules said from across the table. "It's allowed to hurt." Amara unwrapped her sandwich. "It's not allowed to stop me." Devin slid into the seat behind her, eyes restless. "I think," he lowered his voice, "that cropped post? It looks like it came from inside room 214. Amara turned, disbelief flashing hot. "How could you know that?" He held up his phone, thumb hovering above a paused screen recording. When I clicked through the original before it got reposted, everywhere, there was a sliver of the taskbar at the bottom. It's stupid, but Whitaker uses that old desktop theme with the green gradient. And the FaneLam up top said Whitaker *2 capture .png. Who names files like that? His laugh was a whisper with stitches in it. A teacher who saves everything. The cafeteria noise thinned around her. "You're sure?" she asked. Devin's face pinched. "As sure as a screenshot can be. I didn't want to be part of this. I was trying to show he was wrong." He swallowed. "I can't prove it now. People have reposted it 11 billion times. But I saw it." Jules's jaw clenched. "He humiliated you and then exported the humiliation?" Imara stared at the table's gray plastic. "It fits," she said, and felt her breath come back sharper. In the afternoon, Parker cornered her by the vending machines, hands resting casual on the faux wood. "I heard you're thinking of the math competition." His smile was TV-friendly, the kind that sells sunscreen and SUVs. "Just a heads up, those guys don't play. It's like college-level stuff." "Thanks for your concern," she said. "I wasn't concerned," he replied, smile widening. "I was entertained." Then softer, close enough that his breath touched her cheek. "Stay in your lane, Johnson." She watched him go. The machine hummed. A bag of chips dropped for no one. On the late bus home, her phone buzzed with messages that were not messages, tagged stories, screenshots, notifications that strangers were laughing in rooms she couldn't enter. Denise texted, "Double shift, tonight. Left pasta in the fridge. How are you?" Amara typed, "Good. Love you." She deleted good and sent fine. Then she deleted that too. And finally sent "I'm okay. Love you more." She turned her face to the window. The town smeared by, all weathered brick and coupon flags. The same 2 churches. The same payday loan place that changed its name, but not its interest rate. In the apartment, the quiet felt less like comfort and more like a dare. She dropped her backpack and went straight to the table. She pulled out the old flyer she'd taken from the library and laid it down like a contract. Then she opened her textbook. The lamp cast its circle of light. Time narrowed. She traced proofs like paths through a dark wood, marking each turn until the trees became familiar. She set timers, 40 minutes of grind, 5 minutes to stretch. She printed practice problems until the printer caught. The laughter in her phone dimmed beneath the sound of her pencil. It didn't disappear. It just had to wait its turn. At some point, a soft knock kissed the apartment door. She froze. The knock came again, polite, almost apologetic. She opened it to find no one in the hallway, only a thin manila envelope on the mat. Inside sat a packet of competition problems from previous years, photocopies, edges scalloped, and a post-it on top. "Prove it." Below, in smaller letters, a different hand had added, "They'll say you can't. Show them how wrong sounds when the math is right. No name, no return address." Her skin prickled. "Mom?" she called to an empty apartment, as if the room could answer. Who in this building knew enough to gather these problems? Who knew what had been said in room 24? She ran her thumb over the words "prove it" until the ink smudged. She wanted to believe this was kindness, not a trap. She wanted to believe the universe sometimes slid you exactly the tool you needed. When she went to refill her water, her phone buzzed again. A direct message request from an account she didn't recognize. Vector Vet. "You don't know me. Don't quit. If you want a real shot, the library side door opens at 7 a.m. Ask for Mr. Lewis." The message sat there, improbable and practical. She stared at it until the screen dimmed, then brightened again under her thumb. The name meant nothing. The hope did. She laid the competition packet beside the flyer like 2 halves of a map. Then she shut off the apartment's overheads, until only the lamp's cone remained. A small, stubborn sun. She bent back over the page and began. Each solved limit pressed a dent into the night. Each proof added a rung to a ladder she could not yet see the top of. Outside, voices passed in the hall and then left her alone. Inside, the wrong story about her kept trying to write itself. She answered with words. Just before midnight, when the apartment was a single breathing thing, and her eyes burned, she set her alarm for 5 a.m. and stacked the packet on the chair like a promise. In the silence, the laughter from earlier swelled and then thinned, the way a storm does when it realizes it can't find the house it wants to break. Amara powered down her phone and let the dark settle. Instead of breaking, she began, secretly and methodically, to build one theorem, one grit-polished step at a time, determined to rewrite her story, even as the morning promised a meeting with a stranger who might change everything. The alarm buzzed at 5:00 a.m., thin and insistent, and Amara reached for it before it could wake the whole building. The apartment was hushed, the kind of quiet that comes after a night of holding your breath. She slid from bed, toes finding the cool patch of floor, and moved to the table where the competition packet waited like a dare. The manila envelope, the old flyer, the DM from VectorVet. They formed a small constellation under the lamp's cone. She tied her braids back, zipped a hoodie and tucked the packet into her backpack, hands steady because her mind wasn't. The lock turned softly. Denise stepped in from the hallway, scrub top wilted from hours under fluorescent lights, badge clipped crooked, the scent of antiseptic clinging to her skin. She blinked, surprised to find her daughter awake. "You're up early," she said, setting keys in the ceramic bowl that always missed catching them. "Or you never slept." "I slept," Amara answered, which was half true. "I'm heading to the library before school." "The library doesn't open till 8, Denise said, mother's radar quietly switching on. "What's the rush?" Amara could have lied, but lies were a separate exhaustion. "Someone left me practice problems," she said, fingers grazing the packet. "And a message said to meet a Mr. Lewis at the side door at 7. He can help. Mom, I know it's like the first line of every bad decision." Denise cut in gently. Her voice carried the fatigue of a woman who had seen the night shift's worst: strangers' vows, strangers' regrets. She took 2 steps closer, searching her daughter's face as if truth had a temperature. "Who is Mr. Lewis?" "I don't know him yet," Amara admitted. "But whoever it is knows math. They knew about the competition. They said don't quit. And I won't. Not after everything." The word everything was a whole day folded into a single syllable. Denise leaned on the counter, the posture of someone bracing against a wave not yet visible. "Baby, this town has gentle ways of telling you who you can be, and mean ways of reminding you when you forget. That teacher, that account, those kids at lunch, it all adds up. I don't want you stepping into something sharp without me." "I'm already in it," Amara said, voice low. "It's everywhere. On their phones, in their mouths, in the guidance office forms. If I stay small, it doesn't stop. If I try, it gets louder. Either way, it's noise. I want signal." Denise exhaled, a long unspooling sound. She reached out, thumb resting against Amara's cheekbone. "Everything inside me wants to tell you to stay home. Do your homework, keep your head down, until it blows over. But you're not built for down, and I raised you to be louder than other people's limits." She swallowed. "Take your phone, share your location. If anything feels wrong, you walk away, and call me. I don't care if I'm in a patient's room. I'll step out." "I promise," Amara said. The word wasn't just reassurance. It was a rope tied between them. They ate toast in the soft light of a morning, not yet started. Denise told a story from nursing school about a professor who refused to learn her name, calling her the aide for an entire semester, until she posted the highest score on the final. "He shook my hand at graduation like the recognition cost him," she said. "That shook barely covered the debt." She smoothed a wrinkle from Amara's sleeve. "You will meet that look again. It always thinks it's the first time." By 6:45, the sky had drained from bruised purple to the pale gray of a blank page. Amara walked the 4 blocks to the library, with her backpack snug against her spine, the town stretching and yawning around her, the bakery's first batch, a streetlight flickering reluctantly into day, a bus sighing at the curb. The library's main doors were dark, but the side door by the loading bay glowed faintly. She knocked once, then again. It opened a hand's width. "You must be Amara," a voice said, warm gravel, a radio left on low. The door widened, to reveal a man in his 60s, tall and careful, skin weathered like good wood, a gray beard neat enough to suggest it had rule. His polo read "Friends of the Library" above a stitched rocket. "I'm Lewis. Some folks add Mr. to be polite. I answer to both." "You sent the message," Amara said, not asking. "And the packet," he admitted. "Your light is always on at hours that make librarians worry, and engineers curious. I live 2 floors below. My window faces yours. Forgive the spycraft." He tilted his head toward the dim stacks. "Walk with me." They moved through narrow aisles, smelling of dust and spine glue. His steps unhurried, her heartbeat not. "I used to be a systems engineer," he said. "A lot of contracts, some of them with NASA, or their friends. Guidance, navigation, control. The kind of math that keeps a thing where it's supposed to be, or gets it someplace new without losing it. He smiled sideways. People think rockets are about the blast. They're really about the tiny correction. Amara tucked this away like a lesson already earning interest. You worked with NASA? The word landed in the air and stood up straighter. On and off, he said. Some of my work got stamped with someone else's name. That's a long story with a familiar moral. His gaze flicked toward her. Familiar to you, I suspect. She thought of Room 2114, of Be Realistic, of cropped images and captions that turned her learning into the day's entertainment. Yes, she said. The syllable was a firm step on a narrow beam. He led her to a study room. A small aquarium of light with a frosted window. On the table lay a blank pad, a mechanical pencil, and a single sheet turned face down. He sat, steepled his fingers, and chose honesty over ceremony. Yesterday, a student in your class sent me a photo of the board, not the meme. An earlier shot with the mistake and your hand pointing to it. He tapped the table. I know that teacher's kind. I know what that kind can do to a kid who thinks with both halves of her brain. I also know something else. He flipped the sheet. The paper was filled with symbols that looked at first glance like a foreign alphabet, and at second glance like English spoken very precisely. A coordinate plane mapped to a curve with a gap at 0. Not unlike Whittaker's example, but layered with a function defined in pieces. One expression for values greater than 0, another for values less, and a third that suggested what might happen if a thruster fired late. In the corner, 2 circles, one large, one small, hinted at orbits without naming them. Across the top he had written, Window stability undersign ambiguity. It's a toy version of a problem that once kept a room full of engineers up for 3 nights, Lewis said, eyes smiling now. If you can show me clean and clear whether this limit exists and under what conditions a correction stays bounded, you'll have done a piece of thinking that translates to anything that moves and must be right. That includes rockets, and it includes you. Amara breathed in slowly. It looks impossible, she said, and felt the particular kind of excitement that arrives dressed as fear. That's the point, he answered. Impossible looking is often poor notation in a good disguise. He nudged the pencil toward her. Start by testing approach from both sides. Be ruthless about the sign. If you catch where assumptions flip, you'll see where control lives. She pulled the paper closer. Why me? She asked, eyes still on the puzzle. Because you didn't lie to yourself yesterday when everyone else did, Lewis said simply, and because I've watched enough kids to know the ones who stay late with the light on. They're the ones who change the noise. She traced the piecewise definition with her finger, the place where the sign might break the truth, and felt steady. What happens if I solve it? She asked, almost whispering. Then you keep coming back, he said. We do more. We build you a spine made of proofs and a heart that can outlast their comments. And if you don't solve it today, you still come back. The only rule is that you don't let them shrink you. He paused, then added, a quiet afterthought that carried weight. And I filed a complaint against Whittaker last year, when he ran a student out of accelerated math. The school thanked me and shelved it. That's who we're up against. You'll need more than talent. You'll need stubborn. A pulse of anger and clarity surged in her. She lifted the pencil. I have stubborn, she said. Lewis nodded once. Good. Then here's your first correction. He slid a second sheet from under the first, even denser with notation, an alternate version scrawled at the top. This one comes from a real system that cost people months of sleep. Crack either, and the world will never call you stupid again. Amara leaned over the paper, the lines resolving into a map she didn't yet know how to read. Heart pounding like a countdown, when without warning, the study room's phone rang, loud in the small space, and Lewis's expression changed, in a way that told her whoever was on the other end had the power to complicate everything. The library phone kept ringing, sharp and insistent, until Mr. Lewis finally picked it up. He answered with a simple, study room 3. His tone clipped, as if the caller had interrupted something sacred. A pause. His jaw tightened, his eyes flicked toward Amara, and then he said, No, that account isn't mine, and she's here with me now. He hung up without further explanation. Who was that? Amara asked, pencil frozen above the page. Lewis exhaled slowly, settling back into his chair. Wrong number, he said, but the way his hand lingered on the receiver told her it wasn't wrong at all. He leaned forward, voice lowering. Whatever noise they throw at you now, it means they're noticing. That's good. It means you're on the right path. Amara didn't push. She bent back over the puzzle, letting the numbers absorb her. But she carried the unease with her, folded into the corner of her determination. By the next week, whispers had begun to spread. At first it was casual. Someone glimpsed her in the library before sunrise. Another saw her carrying the thick competition packet like a badge of secrecy. Then came the rumors. Amara Johnson thinks she's entering the statewide math competition. In the cafeteria, the words took shape around her like secondhand smoke. A girl at the next table laughed too loudly, saying, "Imagine thinking you're NASA when you barely passed the last quiz." A boy added, "She'll embarrass the whole school. People will think Cedar High doesn't teach." Their voices weren't aimed directly at her, but their glances made it clear she was the subject. At her own table, Jules tried to soften the edge. "They're scared you'll actually do it," he murmured, sketchbook open, pencil tapping restlessly. "If they thought you'd fail, they wouldn't waste their breath." Amara stabbed at her apple with a plastic fork. "Or they just like laughing." Devin, sitting across, kept his voice even. "The competition's real. My cousin did it 2 years ago. It's brutal. 6 hours, questions that look like alien language. But he said the smartest kid in his class couldn't even finish half. If you're going in, you'll need more than practice sheets." Amara finished for him. Her eyes darkened, but her jaw was set. "I know." By Friday, the rumor had solidified into a fact. People didn't say if Amara was entering. They said when. Some mocked. Others marveled. A girl in her chemistry lab whispered, "She's crazy. But if she pulls it off, she'll be a legend." Another muttered, "She's just setting herself up to fail harder." The teachers noticed too. Miss Clark, her English teacher, pulled her aside after class. "You know, math competitions aren't the only way to prove your brilliance. Writing can open doors too. I'd hate for you to be disappointed." Her tone was kind, but it was the kind of kindness that already expected failure. Only one teacher looked at her differently. Mr. Nguyen, the physics instructor. He stopped her in the hall, his arms loaded with lab manuals. "I heard what you're trying," he said, his accent rolling the words carefully. "Remember, failure is not shame. It is data. But if you succeed," he smiled faintly, "if you succeed, it rewrites the data for everyone who looks like you. Don't let anyone take that from you." The more people talked, the more Amara doubled down. Nights blurred into dawns at the dining table, the lamp throwing shadows against the walls. Denise watched her daughter grind through equations with a mixture of awe and fear. One night, she finally said, "Baby, I want you to fight, but don't let this fight eat you. Don't forget you're 15. Don't forget to breathe." "I'll breathe when I win," Amara replied, her eyes never leaving the page. Denise's heart broke at the certainty in her tone. She wanted to tell her daughter to stop, to let the world think what it wanted, to survive quietly, but she also knew that fire, the refusal to shrink, was exactly what she had raised her for. So she kissed the top of Amara's head and whispered, "Then win loud enough they can't pretend not to hear you." Saturday morning, Amara met Mr. Lewis again at the library. This time he carried a thermos of coffee and a folder thick with scribbled notes. "You're serious," he said, watching her unpack her books. "Most kids your age would have folded by now." "Most kids my age didn't get told their kind don't do math," Amara replied. Lewis chuckled, low and knowing. "You've got Katherine Johnson's ghost in you, I swear." He slid a new page across the table, this one even denser than the last. "Piecewise function, nonlinear stability, boundary condition. If you can't solve it, I'll show you how. But if you can," he tapped the paper, "then I'll know you've got what it takes to stand on that stage." She worked for 2 hours straight, sweat prickling at her temples, erasing and rewriting, chasing the problem like it was running from her. Finally, she set the pencil down. The limit exists if and only if the correction vector balances the sign change. Otherwise, divergence. Lewis grinned. "You didn't just solve it. You explained it like an engineer. That's rarer than solving." Amara's chest swelled, not with pride but with relief. She wasn't imagining it. She wasn't fooling herself. She belonged. By Monday, though, resistance sharpened. Parker cornered her near the stairwell. His smirk practiced. "Heard you're going to the statewide. Bold move." Amara adjusted her backpack straps. "Why do you care?" "Because when you bomb, it reflects on the rest of us," Parker said smoothly. "This school has a reputation. Don't drag us down chasing some revenge fantasy." She didn't flinch. Better to chase a fantasy than live a lie. His smile cracked for half a second before he leaned close. Stay in your lane, Johnson. People like you don't last in spaces like that. By midweek, the whispers had split into two currents. One rooting for her, one waiting for her to fall. Some classmates slipped her notes of encouragement. Anonymous words scrawled on folded paper. Prove them wrong. We're watching. Do it for all of us. Others mocked her openly. In the locker room, someone taped a sign above her cubby that read, "Future NASA Janitor." She tore it down without a word, but the ink pressed itself into her memory. That night, Denise noticed her daughter's hands trembling as she tried to eat dinner. Talk to me, she urged. Amara's voice broke. They don't want me to even try. They'd rather see me small. Denise reached across the table, gripping her hand. Then don't give them what they want. Ever. The next morning, as Amara walked into school, she felt the stares sharpen. The rumor had reached the teacher's lounge. Even some staff doubted her, whispering in doorways, their disbelief seeping into the hallways. But Amara walked straighter. She carried her books like shields. At the end of the day, however, she overheard something that froze her in place. Passing by room 2114, she caught Mr. Whitaker's voice leaking through the cracked door. Her? Compete? His laugh was short and cold. Over my dead body. She'll never set foot in that contest. I'll make sure of it. Amara's stomach dropped. He wasn't just dismissing her. He was planning to stop her. Cliffhanger. Amara stood outside room 214, heart pounding, realizing her teacher wasn't going to just humiliate her. He was determined to erase her chance before it even began. She stayed in the hallway until the last chuckle from room 214 died, then slipped away before anyone could see her face and make a story out of it. The words "over my dead body." She'll never set foot in that contest, lodged under her ribs like a splinter she couldn't pull. By the time the last bell rang, she'd already decided she would check the registration herself. Proof beats rumor. Numbers don't smirk. In the library's side room, Mr. Lewis had a laptop open and a legal pad squared to the table's edge. He looked up at the tightness in her shoulders. Talk to me. Whitaker, she said, voice level by force. He's not just laughing. He's planning. Lewis's eyes narrowed in a way that meant calculation, not surprise. Let's get ahead of his plan. He gestured to the chair. Log in. The statewide competition portal, loaded with the grace of a government website from a decade ago. Gray blocks and forms that begged for mercy. Amara typed her email, and the passcode Mr. Nguyen had quietly texted her the day before. The dashboard blinked to life. Cedar High School, team roster. Her stomach dropped. Where her name had been, third on the list, beneath Parker and a junior named Serena, there was a thin line of text in red. Status withdrawn by sponsor. To the right, a smaller note. Sponsor of record. W. Whitaker, depth chair. She didn't say anything for a long beat. She just let the pixels finish being cruel. Then, softly, it says he's my sponsor. Lewis leaned in. Who added you in the first place? I didn't ask him. Mr. Nguyen sent me the login. He must have put my name in. She clicked through the history tab. There it was in pale type. Sponsor change executed by admin sync. 0912 a.m. Another line, tighter. Withdrawal submitted. 0917 a.m. Reason. Eligibility. Eligibility. The word tasted administrative and personal at once. Lewis's mouth flattened. Department chair overrides. They set the system to mirror his roster. Easy to call it an error. Easier to weaponize it. He tapped the date. 5 minutes between the auto switch and the withdrawal. Amara could feel the hallway conversation bleeding into her bloodstream. He waited, she said. He watched the change and then pulled me. Because the rule gives him the lever. Lewis replied. Because telling you no in front of a class wasn't enough. She clicked the help icon. A cheery window bloomed. Need assistance? Contact your school sponsor. She laughed once, without humor. Perfect. Plan B, Lewis said. Re-add me? She asked. He shook his head. Registration closed last night. Locked. He timed it. He was quiet for a moment, then added, we can still knock. They didn't walk to the office. They marched. The main office smelled of dry toner and coffee gone cold. Miss Kincaid looked up from her desk with the smile professionals practice for grief and inconvenience. Amara, Mr. Lewis, what brings you in? Her competition registration shows withdrawn by sponsor. Lewis said, polite as a mailed letter, and twice as sharp. The sponsor listed isn't the teacher who added her. We're here to fix it. Miss Kincaid's fingers fluttered over the keyboard. Let me just… She squinted at the monitor. The way people do when they want you to feel the complexity of their screen. Looks like an automated sync. Aligned the roster with the department chair's list. A common glitch, nothing to worry about. It withdrew me, Amara said. That feels like something to worry about. Accidental, Miss Kincaid said, soothing. And unfortunately, registration is closed. I can put you on the wait list. Lewis didn't blink. Who closed registration? The state committee, she said. Nothing we can do. Who withdrew her? She clicked, then kept her face neutral. Sponsor of record executed the change. For eligibility. What eligibility rule? Amara asked. Miss Kincaid softened her tone, like explaining to a child why a toy was broken. The bylaws require a student to be in honors calculus or higher, with no disciplinary flags. You're in honors pre-calc and you received a detention last week. On paper, you don't qualify. It's bureaucratic. Amara stared at her. The detention was for speaking out of turn. The day he said, she stopped herself before the room had to swallow the sentence. I'm in the top of the class, she said instead. I solved problems your chosen sponsor got wrong. There's no need to be disrespectful, Miss Kincaid replied, the smile not moving. Lewis leaned on the counter, voice still level. You and I both know disciplinary flag is elastic. And the honors requirement is interpretation. She's been working at that level.
That may be, Miss Kincaid said. But rules keep order.
Who keeps justice? Lewis asked, and it wasn't rhetorical.
Miss Kincaid's kindness thinned.
We can't reopen the portal every time a student is disappointed. Be realistic. There it was again. Be realistic. The school's favorite lullaby for ambition. Amara felt the heat rise, then pass, leaving something colder. Put me on the wait list, she said, and print the bylaws. Back in the hallway, she skimmed the printout until the letters blurred. Buried on page 3, a clause blinked like a lighthouse. Alternates will be drawn on site to fill any last-minute vacancies at the discretion of the head judge. Another line, independent entrants not affiliated with a school team are not permitted. They fenced it, she said. Openings exist, but only to those already inside. Lewis nodded. They like to call that fairness. Keeps the velvet rope invisible. He tapped the clause. But here's a seam. Discretion. Discretion can be argued with, loudly and publicly. As if conjured by the word, Whitaker turned the corner, a folder under his arm. Tie loosened to just the right degree of authority. His smile was the surface of a lake in winter. Ms. Johnson, I see you're taking an interest in policy. I see you're taking an interest in my future, she replied. He pretended to mishear. Your sponsor submitted a withdrawal. It's a shame, but eligibility is eligibility. Mr. Nguyen added me, she said. I am the department chair, he answered. Mr. Nguyen's enthusiasm does not override structure. Lewis held his gaze. Structure is a charming word for what you're doing. Whitaker's eyes flicked to him, appraising. Community volunteers should be careful about overstepping. We have processes for a reason, and those processes include posting cropped images of students online. Lewis asked, mild as a kitchen knife. Whitaker's jaw ticked. Accusations without proof are ugly. So is what you said in class, Amara said, her voice low. But you said it. He decided then to perform concern. Amara, no one is preventing you from learning. Competitions are not the only path to growth. Just the path you prefer I not take, she said. He inclined his head as if conceding a point in debate club. Be realistic, he repeated, and walked away. By the time the end of day bell sounded, Cedar Spills had posted a new slide, a screenshot of the roster with her name grayed out, captioned, "Guess the math gods know their limits." Comments stacked. Told y'all. She really thought. Rules are rules. Denise met her at home with eyes that had already seen the hurt. Tell me. They pulled me, Amara said. Called it eligibility. Called it order. Called it everything but what it is. She dropped the bylaws on the table. There's a clause for alternates. If someone doesn't show, the head judge can fill the seat. Denise studied the line. Can, not must. That's a difference you can drive a truck through. I know, Amara swallowed, but it's something. Lewis arrived a half hour later, with a folder labeled back doors, his humor a thin cover for anger. He spread photocopies of old competition programs across the table. Every year 1 or 2 seats open. Illness, car trouble, paperwork mistakes. Head judges hate empty chairs. They'll fill them, but only with kids whose sponsors vouch on the spot. He tapped one program. In 2016, a kid from a private school didn't make it. An alternate from another team slid in. No one blinked. I don't have a sponsor, Amara said. You have me, Lewis said, but I'm not on their list. Silence pressed. Denise broke it. You're not walking her into a room to be turned away and humiliated again. I'm not, he agreed. I'm walking her into a room with a loophole and a plan. He slid a second document forward, printed from a corner of the bylaws website. Most people never saw. There's an exhibition problem given to observers during the lunch break. It's tradition, a marketing trick. If an observer submits a perfect solution, the head judge can invite them to join the afternoon session as a courtesy competitor. It's discretionary and rare, but it exists. Denise frowned. Courtesy competitor? Not officially scored, he said, but physically sitting at the table. Once she's there, turning the courtesy into scoring will be a fight. But it's a fight in the room, not outside of it. Amara felt the ground tilt from under her feet, and then settle. What's the risk? Lewis didn't sugarcoat it. If the school decides you represented them without authorization, you could face suspension. Whitaker will push discipline. He'll say you were insubordinate, that you embarrassed the institution. The head judge could also bar you for disruption. And if we misplay it, they'll make you the cautionary tale for every kid who looks like you. Denise's voice was a thread pulled tight. And if she wins, then they can't pretend not to see her, Lewis said softly. Even if they try, the world won't let them. He looked at Amara. This is the last path forward. It means showing up uninvited and making yourself undeniable. It means risking everything they say you are to prove what you are. Amara ran her finger over the clause until the paper warmed under her touch. The laughter online hadn't stopped. It had multiplied. The school would call this rebellion. The judge might call it disruption. She thought of the study room, the pencil shavings, like ashes, the way the math had opened under her persistence. She thought of Whitaker's 5-minute gap, how quickly a man can erase a name he doesn't think belongs. Tell me what to do, she said. Lewis met her eyes, steady as launch control. Show up on Saturday, he said. Take a seat with the observers. Solve the exhibition problem in a way that makes refusal look ridiculous. Then walk to the head table and ask to be let in. If they still say no, we make sure the asking is seen. It's a thin bridge, Amara, but it gets you across. He closed the folder. It's the last path forward, and stepping on it will mean risking everything. The university gym had been scrubbed into respectability. Rows of long tables draped in navy cloth. A banner that read, Statewide Mathematics Invitational, hung straight as a ruler across the far wall. Volunteers clipped lanyards, judges huddled over binders, and students in matching polos clustered in tight circles like planets with their own gravity. Amara slipped in with the early observers, her hood down, her eyes forward. Miss Lewis walked beside her carrying nothing but a folder, and the kind of calm that made noise feel small. At check-in, a volunteer slid 2 green observer stickers across the table. Spectators sit in the bleachers. She chirped. Teams on the floor, sponsors at the head table. She didn't look twice at Amara, and that invisibility was a gift. They climbed the bleachers to the 3rd row. From there, the room became a grid of possibility. Cedar High filed in through the side door. Serena with her hair in a tight bun. Parker in a Letterman jacket he hadn't earned at a math meet, and behind them, Whitaker wearing a sponsor badge tilted like a throne. His eyes skimmed the bleachers, snagging on Amara. Surprise flickered. Then annoyance hardened. He turned to speak to a judge with a tidy beard and a tighter expression. The man nodded without smiling. Head judge is Dr. Mehta, Lewis murmured, scanning the days. Brown blazer, glasses. The tidy beard is Mr. Collins. He's the rulebook. She's the mind. Remember that. A volunteer rolled out a whiteboard near the bleachers and taped a single sheet to it. Exhibition problem. Lunchtime submissions. Welcome. Amara's gaze snagged on the wording. Welcome sounded like a dare. The problem itself was a nest of notation, innocent in font and devastating in structure. Her heart kicked once. The skeleton of it mirrored the alternate version Mr. Lewis had handed her in the library. Different clothes, same bones. She exhaled and leaned forward. It's our problem, she said. Lewis's mouth tucked into a corner. Not ours, he corrected. Yours. Down on the floor, Parker spotted her again. He elbowed Serena. then lifted his hand to his brow in a mock salute. From here it looked like he was shading his eyes from a light he didn't want to see. Serena's gaze held Amara a second longer, neutral, not unkind, before she fixed her focus on the numbered table where Zeter was stenciled in block letters. The opening ceremony was 15 minutes of careful pomp. Dr. Mehta welcomed everyone, her voice steady and unhurried. "You are here," she said, "because you love the clarity that comes after confusion." The line land timers, scoring, Miss Collins's domain delivered with crisp consonants. Only registered competitors may answer during scored rounds, he concluded, looking up toward the bleachers as if the words were a net he was throwing. Amara took it all in, without blinking. When the volunteers released the teams to their seats and the observers to coffee, she stayed put. The exhibition problem sat on the whiteboard like a quiet bell. She took out a notebook and wrote, careful and fast, the way she'd practiced until the edges of proof cut clean. In the margin she drew the smallest diagram, 2 curves kissing a boundary without crossing. The sign change caught and caged. "Submit before lunch," Lewis said, "or earlier if you're ready." "I'm ready now," she answered. They walked down the bleacher steps like they belonged to gravity. At the head table, Dr. Mehta listened without interruption as Amara placed her solution on the stack. Close up, the judge's eyes held the kind of curiosity that leans forward. She flipped the pages, paused at the diagram, and then at the final line, conclusion and conditions stated like a door opening where a wall had been. "What's your school?" Dr. Mehta asked. "Cedar High," Amara said. She felt Whitaker's attention swivel before she saw him. "Not registered," Mr. Collins inserted, stepping close enough for his aftershave to make a point. "Which means this is a nice exercise and nothing more." "Her argument is sound," Dr. Mehta said, mildly. "Sound is irrelevant if she's not a competitor," Collins replied. "We've had issues before, people trying to insert themselves." Whitaker's voice arrived slightly behind his smile. "She's one of mine," he said to the judges, and then to Amara. But unfortunately she withdrew, before the deadline. He turned back, palms open in a gesture rehearsed for grant committees and school board nights. "We must protect the integrity of the event." "Integrity isn't a fence," Lewis said quietly. Dr. Mehta studied him. "I know you," she said, not quite a question. "Arthur Lewis," he replied. "Systems. Retired." Something like recognition moved behind her glasses. Her mouth almost smiled. "I read a paper of yours on bounded corrections my first year out of grad school." Whitaker's smile thinned. Collins's did not exist. The room hummed with the pre-round bustle. The scoreboard screen blinked awake. Dr. Mehta glanced at the stack of exhibition solutions, then at Amara's. Her decision seemed to move through her like weather. "There is a courtesy competitor provision for afternoon sessions," she said. "More to the air than to anyone. Not used often. Abused when it is," Collins muttered. "Observed and measured," Mehta corrected. She turned to Amara. "Take a seat, just off the floor. If there is space for an extra during the warm-up, non-scored, you may demonstrate your process. Nothing more. Understood?" It was a sliver of a sliver, but a sliver can split granite. "Understood," Amara said. They placed a single chair at the end of the last row, a few feet from the cedar table, as if to remind everyone what proximity was not. Parker couldn't resist. "Cute," he murmured, as he passed. "Fan seating. Earned seating," Serena said under her breath, not looking at him. The MC, bright tie, nervous energy, took the microphone. "We'll begin with a 2-minute warm-up to calibrate. Clickers. Not scored." Volunteers handed out small white placards for the calibration. Amara received nothing. She watched, fingers steady in her lap. "Question 1, the MC read. "Find the sum of the series." The expression unfurled, a trap disguised as a gift. She'd seen something like it at 2 a.m. 3 nights ago. A series that only surrendered if you coaxed it with a telescoping trick, and refused to be seduced by the alternating signs. Pencils scratched. Heads bent. Amara closed her eyes for a breath, then opened them into clarity. She lifted her hand. No one had said she could, but no one had said she couldn't. The MC faltered. Surprised, Dr. Mehta inclined her head, just enough. "If permitted," Amara said, voice even. "I can demonstrate." Non-scored, Mehta reminded the room. She nodded once. Amara stood without theatrics, moved to the sideboard, and wrote in smaller, neater script than room 2114 ever allowed her. She cancelled the right things, and nothing else. She stacked the partial sums until the pattern confessed. When she turned, the whiteboard held an answer that didn't need an exclamation point. A ripple crested through the gym. Soundless first, then hushed. Parker's mouth tightened. Serena smiled into her sleeve. Whitaker's jaw set. Correct, the MC said, relief and awe tangling. Nicely done. A volunteer darted over with a placard, like a superstition had been satisfied. You can keep this, he whispered. She sat. The next calibration question dropped. She solved. So did half the room. But not as quickly, and speed had its own music. The third came. She moved again, not to show off, but because the proof wanted a clean line. The room began to tilt toward her, the way a crowd pivots toward the person telling the truth. And then before the first official, scored round could begin, Mr. Collins stepped forward and lifted a hand. Stop the clock, he said to the MC. A timer froze at the corner of the screen. The gym's hum collapsed into attention. This cannot continue, Collins announced, his voice pitched to reach the bleachers. We have a non-registered individual, answering from the floor. This is a violation of format and a threat to fairness. He looked directly at Amara as if she were a rule broken on purpose. We need to determine whether she even belongs here. The room held its breath after Mr. Collins's interruption. The timer on the big screen blinked, frozen, its digits suspended like a heartbeat caught mid-beat. Amara stood at her seat, placard resting in her hand, the weight of eyes pressing from all directions. Dr. Mehta remained still, chin lowered, gaze calculating. The silence stretched long enough to feel permanent. Finally, she spoke. Mr. Collins, fairness is not threatened by excellence. Her tone was calm but edged. This competitor has demonstrated skill without advantage. We proceed. Collins's lips thinned into a line, but he stepped back. Your call, he said, though his voice carried a warning. The timer restarted. Official rounds began. Amara sank back into her chair, her pulse steady now, not calm, but tethered. She had made it inside. That was step one. The first few rounds unfurled like controlled fire. Geometry, number theory, calculus tricks. Amara answered each without flourish, her pencil racing but precise, her solutions more like unfolding inevitabilities than guesses. By the third question, murmurs rose from the bleachers. By the sixth, half the gym leaned forward. Serena, seated across from Parker at the cedar table, slipped her a quick glance, curiosity shading into respect. Parker avoided looking at her entirely, jaw tight, knuckles white against his pencil. But the momentum that carried her began to draw suspicion. By round 8, Collins leaned toward the other judges, whispering. Dr. Mehta raised one brow, but said nothing. The MC's voice grew tighter with each correct solution. Amara delivered. She could feel it, the weight, not of admiration but of people searching for the flaw that must explain her success. At the break, Parker found her near the water cooler. His voice was low, sharp. Don't get comfortable. They'll never let you win. Amara met his stare. Then I'll leave them no choice. The afternoon session began, with a shift in atmosphere. Dr. Mehta tapped her microphone. For our advanced round, the committee has selected a challenge problem. No student in the history of this competition has solved it fully. You may attempt it individually. Partial credit will be considered. Time allowed. 2 hours. A hush fell. Papers rustled as the volunteers distributed copies. Amara's hands trembled once as she unfolded hers, then stilled. The problem sprawled across the page, longer than a paragraph, layered with conditions, a piecewise defined function nested inside an integral, its behavior depending on sign ambiguities at the boundary. Hidden inside was a stability question. Under what parameters does the sequence converge, and when does it diverge irreparably? She inhaled sharply.
This wasn't just math. This was Lewis's problem.
Not identical, but its cousin. She could see the bones of it, the same fragile line between balance and collapse, the same need for ruthless honesty about signs. It was as if the competition had handed her the very ghost she'd been wrestling with in secret. Pencils began scratching across the room, but soon slowed. Students frowned, erased, rewrote. The clock on the big screen ticked down from 2 hours, each second louder than the last. Amara's mind slipped into rhythm. She began by testing limits from both sides, sketching graphs in the margins, marking where discontinuities lurked like traps. She broke the problem into smaller bones, naming each condition before it could hide. Every page she filled was a step deeper into silence. At the cedar table, Parker chewed his lip, staring at an empty page. Serena scribbled furiously, then crossed everything out. Across the room, a boy from Northview muttered, "Impossible," loud enough for nearby competitors to hear. Slowly, pencils stilled, shoulders slumped. The gym's noise became the tick of the clock in the scratch of only one pencil. Amara's. From the bleachers, whispers began. "She's still writing. What's she seeing? She's crazy. The voices cut off as Whitaker stood near the judges, arms crossed, watching like a man eager for collapse. Amara pressed on. Her notes grew denser, her diagrams sharper. She worked past the dead ends and found the path she had traced with Lewis in the library, the one that said, "If the sign flips, stability depends on the correction vector, otherwise divergent." The words weren't written in the problem, but they pulsed underneath it like a heartbeat. Halfway through, fatigue set in. Her hand cramped. Her back ached. She thought of the voices online, the memes, the detention slip. She thought of her mother's tired eyes, and her promise, "Don't let them see you break." The pencil shook, but did not stop. At the 90-minute mark, Dr. Mehta walked the aisles, glancing at solutions. She paused behind Amara, eyes narrowing slightly, as she read the neat scaffolding of her proof. No word passed her lips, but her hand tightened on the clipboard. She moved on. The room sagged under the weight of surrender. Students leaned back, sighing. Some folded their papers, blank except for the first line. Even Serena lowered her pencil, frustration evident. Only Amara kept going, sweat darkening her cuffs. With 5 minutes left, the MC announced, "Competitors, please conclude your work." The clock glared. Amara flipped her last page, diagrammed the final balance point, and began the conclusion. Her mind burned, but the logic crystallized. The sequence converges when the correction vector neutralizes the discontinuity across the sign boundary. Divergence occurs otherwise. Therefore, stability exists only under bounded correction, precisely defined here. Her pencil moved across the page in sharp, confident lines. Whitaker leaned closer to the judges, gesturing urgently. Collins nodded, already preparing to pounce. The clock ticked down. 00. Her hand cramped again. She shook it out, pressed harder, underlining her conclusion twice. The gym seemed to close in. The hum of lights, the collective breath of hundreds waiting to see if the girl who couldn't do math would fall short. Sharon 0. She dotted the final I, drew the last arrow. 00000. She raised her pen, arm trembling but certain. The completed solution stacked neatly across 5 pages, her handwriting steady as proof. The buzzer split the silence. The sound rang sharp, final, and Amara Johnson lowered her pen onto the desk, her solution complete. The judges exchanged a look. Half shock, half calculation. One leaned to the microphone as the room held its breath, about to decide whether her solution would be celebrated or erased. The buzzer's echo was still trembling in the rafters when Dr. Mehta lifted Amara's pages from the stack. She read the last line twice, pen hovering, mouth set in a careful line. Mr. Collins leaned over her shoulder, skimming for a flaw the way some people scan headlines for bad news. Whitaker stood an arm's length away, sponsor badge catching the light, eyes bright with a private calculus. "Walk us through your conclusion," Dr. Mehta said, voice amplified just enough to reach the front rows. No warmth, no ice, only procedure. Amara stood. Her legs felt like hollow bones at first, then steadied under the weight of purpose. She carried the top page to the sideboard and wrote with the same neat script she'd learned to trust in the quiet of her kitchen. The instability isn't about the integral alone. It's the sign flip at the boundary. If you treat it as symmetric, you pretend away the problem. When you isolate the correction vector and require boundedness, the divergence vanishes. The sequence converges here. She circled a condition, and nowhere else. The room was very still. A cough bounced once, embarrassed by its own timing. On the cedar table, Serena leaned forward, eyes locked, lips parted. Parker stared at his blank work, as if it had betrayed him. Collins cleared his throat. "And your sources?" "My work," Amara said, "and practice with a mentor." "Mentor's name?" Collins asked too casually. "Arthur Lewis," she answered. A murmur nibbled the edges of the crowd. Dr. Mehta's pen paused midair. "Noted," she said. Then, softly, to Collins, "It stands." Collins didn't argue with the math. He stepped around it instead. We cannot score a courtesy competitor's solution in an individual round, he announced, addressing the room as if they were a jury. That's our rule. This solution, while compelling, cannot be considered for points. I didn't ask for points, Amara said evenly. You asked for a demonstration. Whitaker smiled without showing teeth. And she's very gifted, he said to the days, but not registered. The challenge remains unsolved for official purposes. Dr. Mehta's jaw worked. The result of the problem is clear, she said. What remains is how the event responds. The MC, caught between scripts, checked the timer and then the judges. Do we proceed to awards? He asked, voice too bright. Hold, Collins said. He huddled with Dr. Mehta and the two other judges, their heads close, papers fanned like shields. Whitaker stepped half into the circle, not invited, not asked to leave. The conference lasted long enough for the crowd to get restless. Students whispered, parents craned, phones rose, slyly at first, then openly. Mr. Lewis kept his eyes on Amara. Breathe, he said under his breath. Whatever happens next is data. The judges broke their circle. Dr. Mehta approached the microphone. Due to procedural irregularities regarding eligibility and floor participation, she said. Each word chosen like a stone. The committee has determined that the results of the advanced round will be inconclusive. It wasn't a gasp that followed. It was something heavier. A low, injured sound moved through the gym, like a groan from the building itself. Serena pressed her fist to her mouth. Parker exhaled a laugh. He tried to swallow and failed. Whitaker's eyelids eased, satisfaction smoothing his features. Inconclusive, the MC repeated, stunned, off script. For the purposes of the official record, Collins added quickly, stepping to the mic, no competitor solved the challenge problem today. Amara felt the sentence hit and scatter inside her. The insult in room 2014 had been sharp. This was duller and deeper, a weight lowered onto her chest by men who could name it. Policy instead of cruelty. She kept her spine straight. She did not move. From the bleachers, a voice called. Let her present formally. Heads turned. It was Mr. Nguyen, tie askew, one hand wrapped around the railing, as if to steady a suddenly moving world. If procedure is the problem, use procedure. Allow a presentation. Let the room see the proof. Collins didn't look up. Presentations are not part of the format. Dr. Mehta looked as if she wanted to say something, and swallowed it. We will be issuing commendations to top-scoring teams for earlier rounds, she said, softer, as if speaking past a closed door. We appreciate everyone's efforts. You appreciate the effort you can erase, a parent muttered. The words were too low for the mic, loud enough for the row. Serena stood. She solved it, she said, voice clear. She wasn't talking to the judges anymore. She was talking to the room. You all watched her solve it. Parker grabbed her sleeve. Sit down, he hissed. She shook him off. No. Amara met Serena's eyes for a second. Something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, of the cost of saying truth aloud. Then Amara looked back to the days. You asked for clarity after confusion, she said, quoting Dr. Mehta's opening. Here it is. Don't pretend you can't see it. Whitaker stepped closer to the mic, bending the line between sponsor and stage. Miss Johnson, that will do, he said, voice dipped in condescension. We're not here to make a spectacle. Then stop performing, Mr. Lewis said. The sentence quiet and edged. Sir, Collins snapped, you are not on the program. And yet here we are, Lewis replied evenly. The MC, desperate to land the plane, rattled off thanks to sponsors and volunteers. A student in a polo brought out a tray of medals that suddenly looked like props. The scoreboard blinked to a screensaver. The room shuffled, then stalled, no one certain whether to leave or riot. Amara stayed anchored. Inside her, a part of her had been braced for a loss. She had not prepared for a win that could be denied with a sentence. Walk, Lewis murmured. We take the proof and we walk. They can keep their record. We'll keep the truth. They slipped along the edge of the floor, past the cedar table. Parker couldn't resist. Told you they wouldn't let you win, he said lightly. Not your arena. Serena's glare could have cut steel. It's everyone's arena, she said, more to herself than to him. Near the exit, Amara heard it, a small mechanical click every few seconds. She turned. Devon stood halfway up the bleachers, phone held steady against the railing. Eyes locked not on her but on the dais where the judges were already gathering their papers. He wasn't filming her victory pose. There wasn't one. He was filming the moment the rulebook declared the truth void. She walked toward him, and he lowered the phone just enough for her to see the screen. The frame showed the whiteboard with her final line, and the mic with Collins's words laid over it. No competitor solved the challenge problem today. Devon's jaw worked. I kept the audio clean, he said. No commentary. Just what happened. You'll get in trouble, she said. So will they, he replied. His thumb hovered. You want me to wait? She looked back at the floor, at Whitaker shaking hands, at Dr. Mehta speaking to a student with apology threaded through her posture, at Collins slotting papers into a folder like evidence sealed from air. She looked at Miss Lewis, who had watched men like Collins close doors for decades and learned how to find windows. She thought of her mother's warning, don't let them see you break. She felt the break and the refusal at the same time. Post it, she said. Devon nodded once and tapped. The upload bar inched, then surged. Within seconds, his screen vibrated. 3 likes, then 12, then 100. Comments flew upward like startled birds. Someone clipped the last 10 seconds and added the caption. She showed the proof. They said inconclusive. By the time Amara reached the parking lot, her phone silent all day by choice, lit up with notifications, trying to force their way through her do not disturb. In the reflection of the gym's glass doors, she saw herself not as the girl too dumb for math, not even as the girl who had solved the impossible, but as someone carrying a fuse she hadn't asked to light. Inside, the judges closed their binders. Outside, a video began its run through group chats and timelines, through feeds and For You pages, gathering speed, gathering indignation, gathering names. And somewhere beyond the campus, in an office lined with star maps and equations on glass, a notification pinged on an account whose bio read simply, "We're listening." The upload hit the web like a spark in dry brush. At first it was just Devon's clip, 38 seconds of Amara's clean conclusion on the whiteboard, followed by Mr. Collins's voice flattening it into inconclusive. Then it was a repost with the caption. She showed the proof. They closed the book. 10 minutes later, it had music under it, and subtitles for emphasis. By the time Amara and Mr. Lewis reached the sidewalk, the view count sprinted past 100,000 and didn't look back. Denise was halfway home from her shift when her phone began vibrating in frantic bursts. Are you seeing this? Is that Amara? Turn on channel 7. A colleague sent a text with a clip where someone had stenciled "Let her solve" across the frame. Denise pulled into the lot on reflex. Not memory. She took the stairs 2 at a time and found her daughter at the table, hands hovering above folded pages like they were still radiating heat. What happened? Denise asked, breathless. They called it inconclusive, Amara said softly, the words arranged to keep them from breaking. In the room they said the truth didn't count. Denise glanced at the screen, comments pouring in, outrage braiding with disbelief. This is how bias works. They saw her and still chose not to see. Girl solved a problem the whole room couldn't touch. She pulled Amara into her arms, and for one deep second, they just stood, mother and daughter against a chorus of strangers who somehow knew their story. Across town, the gym emptied into a parking lot, buzzing like a hive. Serena walked with her team, and peeled away when Parker started narrating the day, as if he'd authored it. She texted Amara a single line, "For what it's worth, I know you did it." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Amara's reply arrived. "For what it's worth, thank you." By dusk, the platforms had found their rhythm. Instagram filled with side-by-side posts. Amara's board versus the microphone. TikTok stitched the clip with creators explaining the math in accessible language. Fingers dancing over floating graphs. She isn't lucky. She's right. On Twitter, a thread from a black aerospace engineer named Zuri Hall threaded history through the moment. We tell black kids to be twice as good. Nobody warns them the measuring stick gets moved mid-exam. The tweet raced through timelines and landed beneath a blue check reply from a local station. We're at Cedar High. Tune in at 10. The hashtag that stuck was simple. Letter score. The first reporter knocked at 7:19 p.m. A second arrived with a light kit, their shoes squeaking politely on the apartment's tile. Denise opened the door but planted herself like a lock. She's a minor, she said. No cameras in her face. The reporters softened their voices, promising sensitivity. They set up in the courtyard instead, capturing a backdrop of laundry lines and leaning bikes, the unglamorous truth of where math prodigies sometimes learn to hold their breath. Inside, Mr. Lewis sat at the corner of the table with a legal pad, translating outrage into steps. Tomorrow we file a formal appeal with the committee, he said. We attach your written proof and request inclusion in the official record. They'll toss it, Denise said. They tossed her in public. They'll toss it privately too, he agreed. But paper leaves trails. Umara's phone trembled in her palm. They're tagging the school, she said. And Whitaker. She stared at a particular comment with a fridge-cold rush of clarity. They'll say I cheated. As if cued, the burner account 8 Cedar Spills posted a new clip. A shaky angle from the back of the gym. Captioned, "Courtesy competitor jumps the line." The comments turned anxious. Was she allowed? Is this real? Wait, what's a courtesy competitor? It was a play not to win the argument, but to fog it. Almost immediately, a second video rose to meet it. Stitched by Mr. Nguyen in his kitchen, sleeves rolled, voice calm. I teach physics at Cedar, he said to camera. Here is the rule. Here is the clause allowing warm-up demonstrations. Here is the math. He cut to a scan of Amara's solution with identifying details covered, his cursor lingering over the crucial lines. Fairness is not threatened by excellence. The comment pinned beneath read, "Teacher says she's right." The fog thinned. The fire brightened. Then came the school's statement. A pale rectangle on their social accounts bearing the crest and the sentence. Due to procedural irregularities, final results could not be validated. It was the same phrase in nicer font. Every reply was a live wire. Say her name. Irregularity, black girl solved it. Cedar, you good. The unexpected twist landed just past 9. Devin posted a screen recording of the registration portal's history. Blurred IDs, except for the decisive lines. Sponsor change executed by admin sync, 09:12 a.m. Withdrawal submitted, 09:17 a.m. Reason, eligibility, sponsor of record, W. Whitaker. He added nothing but a timestamp, and the question eligibility, or gatekeeping. The recording pulsed across feeds. Someone overlaid it with a photo of Whitaker at the dais and labeled it, 5 minutes to erase a name. Within an hour, the school's voicemail filled. Someone created a Google Doc compiling responses from alumni, stories of being advised into lower tracks, jokes that weren't jokes, evaluation comments that fogged attitude over achievement. I wasn't crazy, one wrote. It happened to me too. The document grew longer than the administration's patience. Reporters returned. Denise, exhausted and ferocious, met them on the walkway. She is 15. She said evenly. She solved a problem your cameras couldn't film if you tried. My daughter is not a segment between weather and sports. She is a person, and what happened to her is a pattern. You can quote me. The microphones leaned in. Someone asked if they could speak with Amara directly. Not tonight, Denise replied, and shut the door with a soft finality. Inside, they unplugged the television. The apartment exhaled. Amara rubbed the cramp from her hand, as if the day were still inside the muscle. I didn't think it would be this loud, she said. That's what happens when the room tries to make a truth small, Lewis said. The world grows it. Amara looked at him. You're sure this is good noise? It's dangerous, he said, and necessary. Both can be true. His phone vibrated on the table. He glanced down and stilled. Huh. What? Denise asked, alert again. An email, he said, blinking at the address. Old colleague, agency domain. Subject line says, "Are we looking at one of yours?" He read silently for a moment, then looked up. They saw the clip. They want to see the work. Amara's chest flared with something like vertigo. NASA. He tilted the phone so she could see the logo at the signature's bottom. A division, he said, careful. Not a promise, but a door. Before he could reply, there was a knock that wasn't media. A softer rhythm. The elderly neighbor from 3B, Ms. Alvarez, stood in the hall with a foil-covered tray, and the next-door teen, Nia, clutching a stack of construction paper. We brought dinner, Ms. Alvarez announced, chin lifted like she'd dare anyone to stop her. Nia held up the papers, poster board messages written in paint marker, shaky but fierce. We believe you. Math is for us. Make them count it. Amara smiled without permission. Thank you, she said, and meant the words as a prayer. The building moved with a collective energy. Someone propped the front gate, so delivery drivers could get through with donated pies and grocery bags. A neighbor she'd never met nodded at her like they shared a joke. For one brief hour, the hate online felt smaller than the love at the door. Then the school fired its next shot. A robocall rolled out to parents. There was an incident at today's event involving unauthorized participation by a Cedar student. We are investigating. Please remind your students that rules ensure fairness for all. The transcript hit Facebook in seconds, and the comment sections lit up with two camps: the rules are rules choir, and the chorus that had watched the clip and decided some rules deserved breaking. Denise's jaw set. That's not an investigation. That's a narrative. She reached for the car keys. We should get ahead of this with the district. Tomorrow, Lewis cautioned. Tired minds break easy, and we don't give them a broken version of you. He was right. They ate in quiet fits while the outside world roared. Amara read messages from strangers that felt like letters from a future where she had already made it. My daughter watched you and asked for a math book. I'm 37 and thought math rooms weren't for me. You made me want to revisit the door. She let those sink in. She did not read the other messages, the ones that used her name like a slur, that dressed envy and policy. Those could live in the trash. Near midnight, the noise folded into something narrower. A video went live from Zuri Hall, the engineer whose thread had threaded history to her day. Here's what I saw, Zuri said to the camera. A kid who did the work, and a system that prefers to grade behavior over brilliance when the behavior comes in a black girl's body. The comments poured. Zuri added, to the people in charge, you just taught every child watching that the rules protect power, not fairness. Fix it. In the quiet after, Amara's phone buzzed once. An unknown notification with the same tiny icon she'd glimpsed in the reflection of the gym's glass doors hours earlier. She opened the app not out of curiosity but out of compulsion, as if a drumbeat had reached her through concrete and called her by name. The account had a blue check and a spare bio. We're listening. The latest post was a simple graphic, black text on white, no flourish, no clip. It read, "We want to see the girl who solved the unsolvable." The handle beneath it was official and unmistakable. NASA had just tweeted. The tweet did not feel real until the email arrived. Headers clean, signature block neat, the kind of official that doesn't ask to be believed. Johnson Space Center invites Amara Johnson to Houston for a technical review of her solution. A second line, practical and human. As a minor, please bring a guardian. Travel arranged. At the bottom, point of contact, Dr. Priya Rao, guidance, navigation and control. Denise read it twice, then a third time aloud, as if the syllables might collapse if she didn't hold them. Houston, she whispered, not to the city but to the idea of it. She glanced at Amara. If we go as ourselves. No one photographs you like a mascot. Mr. Lewis's mouth bent toward a smile he was trying to keep from looking proud. They're not calling for a photo, he said, tapping the line with Dr. Rao's title. They're calling for the math. 2 days later, the airport moved around them in its practiced hustle. A TSA agent peered at Amara's boarding pass, then at her face, then at Denise, as if guardianship required proof beyond resemblance. It's for NASA, Denise said, gentler than she felt. A different agent overheard, his expression lifting. Go get him, he said. In the jetway, a man in a suit leaned down to his son and said, see? Math can take you places. The boy looked at Amara like she was a story, not a person. She tucked the smile she wanted to offer back into her pocket, and kept walking. Houston was heat and sky and a car with a badge on the dash that made the guard at the JSC gate nod without small talk. They were escorted through a lobby where bronze plaques shared oxygen with photographs of people wearing headsets and history. Denise's hand found Amara's and squeezed once. Hard and quick. Breathe, she said, the all-purpose instruction for rooms that test your right to be in them. Dr. Priya Rao met them outside a conference room in Building 30. She was mid-30s, brown skin and sharp eyes, her ID clipped to a lanyard next to a laminated card, covered in equations small enough to be talismans. Amara, she said, offering her hand like an equal's. I've read your proof 3 times. I would have called even if Twitter hadn't. Behind her, the room's whiteboards were already scarred with yesterday's thinking. 3 other people waited. Marcus Reed, flight dynamics, late 40s, sleeves rolled as if he'd signed a treaty with his shirts. Elena DeWitt, a mathematician with a braid, longer than patience, and an older man from public affairs whose tie looked like compromise. Priya gestured to the table. This is your show, she said. We'll ask questions. We won't perform disbelief. Denise sat beside her daughter, posture both proud and braced. Mr. Lewis took the far seat, as if distance would keep his history from interfering with Amara's present. Priya slid a stack of glossy printouts across. Here's the formal statement of the competition problem, she said, then a second stack thicker, Here's our problem. The NASA version wore different clothes, variables renamed, constants tucked into matrices, a spacecraft sketched as a box with arrows for thrust. The core was the same stubborn beast. A piecewise correction near zero angular rate. A sign ambiguity the size of a hairline crack and just as dangerous. A question about stability that had cheated too many fixes. We call it window stability under sign ambiguity, Marcus said, perching on the edge of the table. We've argued this in midnight language over coffee you could stand a wrench in. We keep ending up in spirals, either mathematical or orbital. Elena laid a palm on the printout. Last year we got a proof that said under certain conditions, the correction is bounded. We tried to implement it. The sim blew up at precisely the boundary we were told would hold. She glanced at Mr. Lewis, then away, a flicker of recognition she didn't name. Priya turned to the far whiteboard and uncapped a marker. Show me your route, she said to Amara. Start where your instincts did. Don't translate for us. We'll follow. Amara stood, hands steady. She rewrote her approach without making it performative. Limits from both sides, an honest inventory of discontinuities, an insistence that the sign not be smoothed in the name of comfort. She drew the smallest diagram, a boundary with two curves kissing it without crossing, and talked through the correction vector as if it were an actual force to be handled, not vocabulary to be admired. The board filled one quiet line at a time. So your boundedness condition, Elena said, leaning in, doesn't require symmetry. It requires truth about the sign. It requires we stop pretending the boundary is soft, Amara answered. You can't average a cliff and call it a slope. Marcus huffed a laugh. Someone put that on the wall. Priya paced. The way only people who think by walking can pace. Insinuation, she said. This would mean you gate the correction function on the sign before you integrate. You're saying we're integrating wrong. I'm saying you're integrating a lie, Amara replied. Then flushed. Then didn't flinch. Sorry, that came out perfectly, Priya said. Public affairs cleared his throat. Before we get too deep in weeds, he began, it might be smart to talk about the optics. There's pressure to show you, Miss Johnson, in mission control. A photo, something to inspire. Denise turned her head slowly. My daughter isn't a billboard, she said evenly. If you want inspiration, let people watch what happens when you don't erase her. Priya nodded. We're here for substance. Photos can wait. She gestured toward the glass wall where the historic Mission Operations Control Room sat like a museum exhibit. You'll see it before you leave, I promise. But not because we need likes. They pushed aside chairs and moved to the sim lab. Computers whirred. Screens glowed with the controlled chaos. Only engineers call friendly. Marcus plugged in a code path and pointed. This is where we dodged the sign in software, he said. We smoothed. We were tired. The code got compiled by committee. Committees don't catch cliffs, Elena murmured. Try her gate, Priya said. Bind the correction to the sign, then integrate. Marcus typed, hands moving like a pianist crossing a bad chord. He hit enter. On the main display, a small blue line representing attitude drift shuddered, then flattened into a steady glide through the boundary. Past runs popped onto the screen for comparison. The old approach spiking into chaos, the new one hugging the line like something that had learned to respect gravity. That's it, Elena said softly, and then louder, as if to convince the room it could be true. That's it. Marcus gave the line a skeptical look that wasn't disagreement. Just a man with scar tissue checking for phantom pain. He ran edge cases, the noisiest data they had, spikes and lags and bad sensor tantrums. Each time, the blue line flexed, and then found center again. Not magic. Math. What were you calling this failure mode? Mr. Lewis asked, voice careful, as if he were asking a remembered thing to come closer. Marcus's face shifted into a half smile. We used to call it the Johnson glitch, he said. A joke. You know, after he stopped, realizing in the same breath that the joke landed differently in this room. Priya cut in quickly. After Catherine, she said, naming the correction. Her memo on sign conventions got lost in an archive, until someone needed it. This fix deserves a name that isn't a punchline. Elena glanced at Mr. Lewis. We almost had it, she said, words directed at no one, and at everyone. Years ago, a contractor wrote a draft that got edited. The edit smoothed the sign. The smoothed sign broke the world. Priya looked at Lewis. Your draft? He didn't meet her eyes. A version, he said. With partners. Some of my work wore other badges by the end. The room held the admission without turning it into ceremony. Priya reached for a marker and wrote on the whiteboard, "Bounded correction. A. Johnson. That name will do for now," she said. Public Affairs returned to his role. "We still have interviews scheduled," he reminded, gently relentless. "The administrator's office wants a live segment in the morning. Also, local news is camped at your hotel." Denise fixed him with the same stare she used on patients who insisted on walking alone with post-op legs. "She can answer thoughtful questions," she said. "We will not let anyone make her argue for her humanity on camera." Priya raised a hand. "I'll run interference. We keep this technical. If anyone drifts to spectacle, we end the conversation." They returned to the conference room for debrief. Elena slid Amara's written solution into a clear sleeve like a librarian handling a first edition. "We maintain an independent test group," she said. "They'll try to break your result. That's not distrust. It's how we love our work. If it holds, it goes into the patch." Marcus glanced at Priya. "And if it holds, we use it on Kestrel." The word landed like a shifted gravity. Priya shot him a look. He shrugged. "She just fixed our cliff," he said. "She can hear a bird make." "What's Kestrel?" Amara asked, the syllables lifting. "A small sat with a big job," Priya said, weighing how much she could say. "Let's call it a pathfinder for a technique that will matter in 5 years. Your proof helps it stay where it promises to stay." Mr. Lewis leaned back, absorbing both the joy and the ache of watching a door open that had once closed in his face. Denise watched her daughter's profile soften and steel at once. Then the twist came, not from NASA but from Cedar. Priya's phone vibrated. She glanced and frowned. "Your school," she said. "Your department chair has emailed our legal team, claiming you misrepresented your eligibility, and that a coach fed you a proprietary solution." "Coach?" Denise repeated, as if the word itself was contamination. Lewis's jaw tightened. "He means me." Elena rolled her eyes. "We don't need a department chair in the chorus when the chorus can't sing." She turned to Priya. "We saw the work. It's hers." Priya's voice cooled. "Legal can handle the noise. The math is the signal." She looked at Amara. "And the signal is strong." They broke for a late lunch that no one tasted. In the afternoon, Priya walked them down a corridor washed in the light of 1,000 photographs. Astronauts adjusting visors. Teams in shirts and ties hunched over consoles. They paused before the glass that separated them from the historic mission control. Denise stepped close, hand against the barrier. "I used to watch this room in documentaries at 3 a.m., folding laundry between shifts," she said softly. "Didn't imagine I'd stand here with my kid's name on a board down the hall." She looked at Amara. "This is yours. Don't let anyone give it to you as a gift." Back upstairs, the room had shifted from skepticism to logistics. NDAs were printed. A schedule was drafted that looked more like a puzzle than an itinerary. Time zones, school hours, video links, check-ins. Elena waved off the idea of a ceremonial photograph. "Later," she said, "after we close the loop in code." Priya waited until the paperwork sat in neat stacks, and the hum had settled into something like breath. She pulled out a manila folder that was thicker than its modest face implied and set it between them. "One more thing," she said. "We'd like your help on a piece of work connected to this. We can't discuss the project in detail without additional clearance. It's not for the press. It's not for the internet. It's complicated." Amara's throat felt tight. "What kind of help?" "Mathematical," Priya said. "The kind you already gave us, but in a different corner of the map. If you agree, there will be background checks, more rules than any sane person needs, and a promise you can't break even when people ask you to." She met Amara's eyes. "Would you like to work with us on a classified project?" The news of NASA's invitation hadn't cooled by the time Amara walked back into Cedar High. The halls buzzed with the same frenetic energy that had once carried her humiliation. But this time, the whispers weren't about her being too dumb for math. They were about Houston, about whiteboards covered in equations, about NASA's official tweet. Still, the moment she stepped through the door of room 214, Mr. Whitaker was waiting. His tie was perfectly straight, his expression carved into something cold and self-righteous. The room hushed. "Well," he said, voice cutting the air. "Our celebrity returns. I hope you've enjoyed your field trip." A few students shifted uncomfortably. Serena, seated in the second row, frowned. Amara kept her shoulders square. "You cheated," Whitaker said plainly. "No 15-year-old child solves problems seasoned engineers have debated for years. It's impossible. Someone fed you the answer. The word hung in the air. A rope thrown into quicksand. Amara didn't flinch. I did the work, she said. Whitaker's smile was thin. No. You performed. You embarrassed this school. And you embarrassed me. I won't have Cedar's name dragged, because one student wanted her 15 minutes. The sting wasn't in the words themselves. It was in the way he spoke them. With the practiced ease of a man who had said similar things many times before, and had always gotten away with it. By lunchtime, the rumor had spread like a stain. She cheated, some students muttered, their voices repeating Whitaker's accusation without question. But others, fueled by what they'd seen online, pushed back. NASA called her. Serena shot at a skeptic. Do you think NASA doesn't check? Devin uploaded another clip that afternoon. This time not of Amara but of Whitaker. It was grainy. Pulled from a class recording a year old. The footage showed him standing in front of the same whiteboard, smirking. His words, "Your kind don't do math. Stick to something easier." The internet didn't pause. It erupted. Your kind? Tweets demanded. This man is teaching children? Old alumni added their voices. I was steered away from AP classes. I was told math isn't your lane. Parents dug through memory. Some still had emails, phrased politely, but dripping with the same message. Don't aim so high. By evening, the local paper ran a headline. Cedar High teacher accused of racial bias after student's NASA breakthrough. National outlets circled. At home, Denise sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open, scrolling with a tight jaw. He's done this before, she said, half to herself, half to Amara. He's been doing this for years. Amara's stomach twisted. And no one stopped him. Because no one listened, Denise replied. Until you forced them to. Mr. Lewis leaned forward, his voice low and deliberate. This is the cycle. One voice cracks the silence, and suddenly the silence looks guilty. People will come forward now, Amara. They'll remember what they swallowed, and they'll hand him his history back. The next morning, Cedar's front lawn was filled with cameras. Parents arrived holding handmade signs. Protect black students. Math belongs to everyone. A group of alumni stood together, holding up enlarged screenshots of their old report cards, some marked with inexplicable needs improvement, despite perfect test score. Inside, the school board called an emergency meeting. Whitaker arrived in a pressed suit, clutching a briefcase like armor. He looked less like a teacher than a man auditioning for his own defense. Cameras flashed. He lifted his chin higher. The superintendent, Ms. Reeves, faced the board members. We are here to review complaints regarding Mr. Daniel Whitaker. These complaints include discriminatory remarks, inequitable grading practices, and obstruction of student participation in academic competitions. Whitaker stood, smooth as glass. Baseless accusations, he said. Social media hysteria. One clever student faked a moment of brilliance, and the world rushed to make me the villain. I have given 20 years to Cedar. 20 years of discipline, of pushing students toward excellence. This witch hunt dishonors every teacher who still believes in standards. Standards? Miss Reeves asked, pointedly. Or prejudice? He bristled. Standards. If we abandon rigor, if we let unqualified students take shortcuts, we undermine everyone. From the gallery, Serena stood suddenly, voice clear. You told her our kind, don't do math. Her mother tugged at her sleeve, but Serena's words carried, sharp as glass. You told me once too that I should focus on English, because numbers weren't my strength. The board shifted uneasily. Another parent raised a hand, holding up an old email printed in ink. Here, she said. He told my son to drop AP Calculus. Said it would save us both some trouble. My son is now a computer engineer. A ripple of murmurs spread. Whitaker's mask cracked just slightly. This is character assassination, he snapped. These people misremember. They twist my words. But the evidence kept piling. Clips. Emails. Alumni testimonies read aloud. Each one painted the same portrait. A man who had spent 2 decades convincing black students that their futures should shrink. Amara sat in the back, not speaking, her heart thudding. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about Serena, about the kids who never pushed past the shame, about the ones who had believed him. Mr. Lewis leaned toward her. Truth is louder than any speech. Let it play. Whitaker's lawyer tried to intervene, insisting that isolated incidents did not represent a pattern, but the board had heard enough to see the threads connecting.
When the meeting recessed, reporters rushed the hall. "Amara, how do you feel seeing your teacher accused?" one asked.
She paused. She wanted to scream. She wanted to tell them it wasn't accusation, it was reality. But instead, she said quietly, "He told me I couldn't, and I did." Then she walked away, leaving the words behind like a fuse. That evening, the school released a statement. The board will vote Friday on whether Mr. Whitaker retains his position. The town split. Some parents defended him, calling him strict but fair. Others demanded his removal. News crews ran clips of protest outside Cedar, voices rising, placards declaring, "No teacher should decide a child's worth." Whitaker went on local radio, voice calm, rehearsed. "I've been targeted because I expect excellence. Not everyone can handle high standards. That's not racism, that's reality." But by now the tide had turned. His words no longer landed like authority. They landed like desperation. Friday arrived. The gymnasium was packed, not for a game, but for the vote. The board members sat at a long table, papers stacked, microphones angled. Whitaker stood tall at the podium, delivering his final defense. "If you fire me, you send a message to every teacher that discipline is dangerous. That truth is unwelcome. That excellence doesn't matter." The room was silent. Then the board chair leaned forward. "Mr. Whitaker, this isn't about discipline. This is about dignity, and whether our students receive it in your classroom." Whitaker's jaw tightened. The board members lifted their hands, one by one, casting their votes. Cliffhanger. As the final hand went up, the chair cleared her throat and prepared to announce the decision that would either end Whitaker's career or shield him one last time. The board chair's voice didn't tremble. "By a vote of 7-0, she said into the gym's hushed air, "Mr. Daniel Whitaker is terminated, effective immediately." A beat of stunned quiet broke into sound, gasps, hands over mouths, a few ragged cheers that the chair's gavel couldn't quite shave down. Whitaker's face didn't move at first. Then the practiced composure cracked. A flick of disbelief. He leaned toward the mic, but they'd already cut it. The silence swallowed whatever last defense he tried to mouth. Security didn't drag him. They didn't need to. He collected his briefcase with careful dignity and walked the aisle past parents holding signs and students who made a hallway of turned backs. At the end he paused, eyes snagging on Amara in the back row. There was accusation in the look and something smaller behind it, recognition that the room he'd ruled could no longer hear him. He left without looking back. The chair hammered the gavel once more. 2 further actions, she announced, voice steady. 1. A third-party audit of grading and placement practices for the last 5 years. 2. Adoption of a Johnson Clause. Any student flagged for eligibility or disciplinary reasons, in a competitive context, triggers automatic review by an independent teacher and a district equity officer. No single person decides a student's future. The murmurs rose to a wave. The clause's name rippled across the bleachers like a banner someone had finally unrolled. Outside, winter light sharpened everything. Cameras caught statements. Parents cried. Alumni hugged in small circles like people who'd made it out of a wreck and were counting each other. Denise threaded through the crowd to her daughter. "Breathe," she said, pulling Amara into a hug that was relief and warning at once. "We won something. Not everything." On Monday, Cedar's hallways felt like a different country. Eyes widened when Amara passed. Whispers tilted into awe instead of derision. A freshman tugged her friend's sleeve and whispered, "That's her." The way people point at Constellation. Serena intercepted her at her locker and didn't bother with a preface. She just wrapped her arms around Amara and held on. "Thank you," Serena said into her shoulder. "For all of us." Miss Kincaid hovered like a person rehearsing an apology. "Amara," she began, smoothing the edge of a manila folder that didn't need smoothing. "I owe you." She swallowed. "I owe you an apology. I told you to be realistic. I meant be smaller. I am sorry." "Change it for the next person," Amara said. "That's the only apology I know what to do with." Miss Kincaid's eyes dampened. "I will." A notice blinked on the hallway TV screens between club announcements and weather. "Department Chair, Mr. Nguyen." Below it a second line. "Math lab hours, daily after school, open to all." A piece of paper taped beneath handwritten. A little crooked. "Bring your questions. Bring the ones someone told you not to ask." In room 214. The same room that had held her humiliation like a ritual. The sub Miss Jordan, greeted the class with a soft, steely smile.
New semester,
She said.
new rules.
We measure thinking, not volume. We will not confuse cruelty with rigor. The tone reset the room's center of gravity. Even the walls felt less tight. Parker slipped in late, slid into his seat with the practiced shrug of someone who wanted to be the weather, not the report. He didn't make eye contact with Amara. After class, he hung back by the door and spoke low without preamble. I was wrong. The words came out shaped by a mouth that didn't often make them. About you. About everything. She studied his face for performance and found, to her surprise, the look of a boy who'd been told he was unquestionable and had finally met a question he couldn't outrun. Then be right next time, she said. For someone who can't push back yet. He nodded. Small. I can do that. At lunch, the cafeteria stuttered when she walked in, then continued the shift from spectacle to normalcy underway. Devin slid into the seat across from her, phone face down for once. State committee posted an update. He said, eyes bright. They're adding your solution to the official record, with a note submitted by courtesy competitor A. Johnson, verified post-event. It's not points, but it's ink. Amara exhaled, a breath she hadn't realized she'd been saving. Ink, she repeated, liking the way the word stayed. An unexpected email chimed during fifth period. Subject line from Dr. Mehta. Erratum, invitation. The message was brisk and generous. The committee would publish an erratum, naming Amara's proof. Mehta asked if she'd keynote a short session at next year's invitational on how to tell the truth about the sign. There was a PS that wasn't procedural at all. Proud of you. Don't let this room be the only one you change. News moved fast now, but so did cleanup. By midweek, the district posted the audit's first action, automatic reevaluations for students who'd been counseled down from advanced tracks. Alumni were invited to submit appeals for transcript annotations. Scholarships would consider them. Denise read the post out loud in the kitchen, the words tasting like a delayed meal. They're going to fix records, she said, half astonished, half angry at the need. Mr. Lewis arrived with a binder labeled Johnson Lab and a dry erase marker tucked behind his ear like a mechanic's pencil. If you're willing, he said, we could start Thursday. Open table in the library. Whoever shows up, we work. No gatekeepers. I'll be there. Mr. Nguyen too. You lead. I'm 15, Amara said. Not as a refusal, but as a check. You're a mathematician, he corrected. Lead. They printed a flyer in black and white. Open math nights underlined twice. At the bottom, her hand added a line that grinned with quiet defiance. Bring your Be Realistic slips. We'll recycle them. Thursday, the library filled beyond fire code. Freshmen in hoodies. Seniors who'd given up on integrals and came back as if a door had opened somewhere inside the night. 2 middle schoolers hovered by the doorway, nervy and starstruck until Amara smiled and waved them in. They pushed chairs together. They argued in good faith. They sketched graphs until the margins ran out. The room's hum was a balm she didn't know she'd need. Midway through, Mr. Nguyen pulled Amara aside and handed her a battered wooden box. Found this in the back of the supply closet, he said. Inside lay a brass-plated trophy from a decade ago. Cedar Invitational, Team Champion. Beneath it, a thin film of dust. Thought you'd want to lend it new meaning. She set it on the corner of the table where everyone could see it, and with a dry erase marker, wrote across the glass, "This is not the ceiling." Unexpected messages continued to arrive. One came from Serena's mother, clipped and formal and full of grace. "Thank you for modeling the fight my daughter deserves." Another came from a number no one recognized until the signature appeared. DeWitt Elena, the NASA mathematician, attaching the first successful test of Amara's bounded correction running in a sim named Kestrel. The blue line. As shadows lengthened, Denise leaned against the library doorframe, arms folded, watching her daughter move from table to table, like someone watering a field. Pride burned in her eyes. Fear lived there too. The knowledge that rooms like this were rare, and that other rooms would not greet Amara so cleanly. She looked at Mr. Lewis. How do we keep this from being a moment that fades? She asked. We keep doing the work when no one is watching, he said. We build muscle instead of headlines. Near closing, a district official in a blazer too new for the job slipped in, introduced herself, and handed Amara a letter embossed with the school crest. On behalf of the board, she said, we'd like to honor you at next month's meeting. Also, she hesitated, then smiled, almost shy. We're launching a student advisory council on curriculum. We'd like you to serve. Advise the people who almost erased me, Amara said, one eyebrow lifting. Exactly, the official replied. She pocketed the letter. Then yes. After the last student left, after the tables were set back in their obedient rows, after the lights clicked to low, Amara lingered in the doorway with Denise and Mr. Lewis. The hallway was quiet in that end-of-day way. Janitors' carts murmuring, a vending machine humming like a distant engine. She opened her phone. There it was, a message from Dr. Rao, clearance preliminary approved. Next phase call, Friday 4 p.m., another from Dr. Mehta. We'll put your name where it belonged the first time. She looked from one message to the other, and then up at the school that had both scarred and shaped her. I'm not done, she said, the words simple, without bravado. They thought this was the headline. It's just the byline. Denise squeezed her shoulder. Then write the next chapter. Amara lifted the marker one more time, and beneath this is not the ceiling, added in small letters, start here, then look up. She powered off the library lights. In the dim hallway the phone buzzed again, an unknown number with a Houston area code, waiting like a doorway, only she could decide to enter. The invitation came folded in an envelope with NASA's insignia pressed into its corner, heavy, official, the kind of paper that felt like it belonged more in a museum than on their kitchen table. Denise held it with both hands before sliding it across to her daughter. Read it out loud, she urged, though her own eyes had already scanned the words 3 times. Amara's voice was careful, steady, but inside she was burning with disbelief. We are pleased to offer you a provisional summer internship at Johnson Space Center, Houston, within the Mission Control Operations Group. Details to follow. She stopped, the words catching, then started again. We believe your insight and perspective will contribute meaningfully to our ongoing work. For a moment the kitchen was utterly silent. Denise pressed a hand over her mouth. Mr. Lewis, seated with his binder open, blinked as though the room had shifted gravity. Amara stared at the page, her heart roaring louder than her voice. This wasn't a headline or a retweet. This was a seat. 2 months later, the Texas heat rose like a wave as she and Denise walked through the guarded gates of Johnson Space Center. Their visitor badges caught the sun, but what caught Amara's breath was the sight of the building itself, sleek glass, the NASA emblem massive against the sky. She'd seen it 1,000 times on TV. She'd even drawn it in notebooks when teachers weren't watching. But here, it was real. Dr. Priya Rao greeted them, in the lobby, her steps quick, her eyes bright. Welcome back, Amara, she said, her tone casual but warm, as though they'd been colleagues all along. Today we don't just talk about your math. Today you walk where history lives. She led them down a corridor lined with photographs, astronauts in flight suits, engineers at consoles, the Apollo team frozen in black and white intensity. Denise reached for her daughter's hand, whispering, your dream has walls and windows now. The door to mission control opened with a soft hydraulic sigh. Amara stepped inside and froze. The room was alive, a low hum of voices layered with the soft beeps of monitored systems. Massive screens filled the front wall, Earth spinning in real time, orbital paths traced like threads of light, telemetry scrolling in columns of numbers. Only a few could read. Rows of consoles stretched out like pews in a cathedral, each one glowing with its own rhythm of buttons and data. Amara's eyes swept upward to the balcony, where visitors often stood, then back down to the rows where people leaned forward, headsets snug, shoulders tense with quiet purpose. She could almost hear the echoes of voices from history. Go for launch. Failure is not an option. Her breath hitched. This wasn't a documentary. This wasn't a borrowed clip online. This was her standing in the very room where human beings had first learned how to steer themselves beyond Earth. Dr. Rao leaned close, her voice low but deliberate. Every person in this room had someone tell them they couldn't. The difference is they stayed. Amara was guided to a console near the back, where a young specialist, Daniel Ung, pulled out a spare headset. Sit, he said kindly. Listen. She slipped it on, and suddenly she was inside the current engineers calling status checks, analysts updating numbers, a controller calmly confirming course corrections, as if moving a craft at thousands of miles per hour were no more remarkable than a bus arriving on time. It was disciplined, methodical, and breathtaking. On the central screen, a red planet glowed against black. Mars, captured by a probe's orbiting eye. Images updated every few seconds. Canyons vast as countries, mountains that could swallow Everest. The room barely looked up, For them it was another day at work. For Amara it was everything. She whispered without meaning to. One day. Daniel glanced at her. One day what? One day I'll be on the team that gets us there. He smiled, not indulgent, but impressed. Then you'll fit right in. During a briefing break, Priya led Amara to a quiet side room where a set of framed patches hung, the insignias of missions past. She pointed to one, Apollo 13. The team in that room saved lives with math and grit. They didn't choose the problem, but they solved it. She turned to Amara. That's what you did when you didn't accept erasure as an answer. You reminded us that the system isn't fixed unless someone fixes it. Amara traced her eyes across the patches, each one a small story stitched in thread. She thought of the classroom where she'd first been told she couldn't, the whispers that had turned her name into a joke, and she thought of the whiteboard, where she had chosen not to believe the lie. This isn't just for me, she said softly. This is for everyone who never got to walk in here. Back at the console, Dr. Rao handed her a printout. Preliminary data set, nothing classified. I want you to run through the correction you derived, and see how it holds on this trajectory. Amara bent over the sheet, pencil moving fast. The lines made sense now, not because they were easy, but because they spoke the language she had chosen to claim as her own. For the first time, she wasn't doing math to prove she could. She was doing it because it mattered. Minutes passed. She slid the sheet back to Dr. Rao, who glanced at it, then grinned. That's exactly right. You caught the error margin. Denise, standing nearby, pressed her fingers to her lips. She had spent years watching her daughter's light dim under teachers who measured potential with bias. Now she was watching her daughter shine in the very place she'd once believed unreachable. Later, when the tour wound down, Amara lingered at the front of the room, staring up at Mars glowing on the screen. Her chest tightened with something fierce, almost painful. For years, teachers and classmates had tried to shrink her horizon. They'd told her to aim for realistic, but here was a world millions of miles away, waiting. She whispered to herself, the words almost swallowed by the hum of machines. No teacher will ever decide my limits again. Her hand brushed the edge of the console, grounding her in this moment, anchoring her to the vow she had just made. And then, as if answering her whisper, the overhead speakers crackled. A voice came through, not one she recognized, but steady, serious. Control, this is Kestrel Flight. We're seeing an anomaly on correction. Request immediate review. Every head in the room snapped up. The hum cut to silence. Screens flickered with new data streaming in. Urgent and unscheduled. Priya's eyes darted to Amara, then back to the screen. The dream had just become a test. The mission in orbit was failing, and Amara was in the room where failure wasn't an option. 15 full circle. The promise. 100 words. The gym had been scrubbed into ceremony. Rows of folding chairs like measured breaths. A blue and silver banner stretched tight across the back wall. Cedar-high commencement. The clock that once counted down pop quizzes still hovered over the double doors, stubborn as memory. On the stage, a podium waited with the school crest on its face, and a single microphone angled toward a future voice. They introduced her with bullet points that sounded like headlines. NASA intern, co-author on a guidance memo, founder of the Johnson Lab Knights that refused gatekeepers. Mr. Nguyen read them dryly, like facts that did not require applause, then stepped aside. When Amara walked into the light, the murmurs calmed as if someone had dimmed the room's weather. Seniors sat marbled in white gowns and borrowed confidence. Parents craned. Denise stood near the aisle, hands clasped, the exact expression she wore when she watched rockets in a live stream. Pride stitched to prayer. Amara rested her fingers on the podium to steady the hum in her chest. Good evening, she said. Her voice was lower now, shaped by rooms that had trained her to carry ideas far without shouting. I stood in this gym once as a kid who thought you measured courage by how quietly you could endure. I was wrong. Courage is telling the truth where a lie is comfortable. She let the sentence settle. Years ago, in a room down the hall, a teacher told me, "You're kind, don't do math." A ripple moved through the seniors. Some angry exhale, some sharp intake. I'm not repeating it to relive it. She said, I'm repeating it so you can name the moment when a life forks. She glanced at the old clock. The second hand moved with the same indifferent rhythm it had back then. I swallowed my tears that day, she said. Then I found a way to answer that didn't look like revenge, but like work. She told them only the bones of the story. The early mornings with the light on. The library side door. The problem that hit a cliff beneath a smooth sign, the day a room decided inconclusive, could erase a solution. She didn't dwell on the headlines. She sketched the quiet, a pencil that wouldn't quit, a mother's warning, a neighbor's encouragement that felt like a permission slip into courage. When she spoke of the tweet with the blue circle that had rearranged her summer, the room's hum brightened. She left out the parts wrapped in clearance. She gave them what would help. And when I finally walked into mission control, she said, I thought the ceiling had moved. Then the overhead crackled. Kestrel flight. We're seeing an anomaly, and I learned what a ceiling really is. She smiled. A quick flash. It's where you choose whether you're small. We applied a correction, one we had argued on whiteboards and tested, until the numbers stopped lying, and the line steadied. Not because it was easy, but because we refused to smooth the sign. A handful of seniors grinned like they recognized the code in that. Some simply leaned forward because the story had bent toward a crisis and then refused to fall. She glanced stage left. In the front row, a small wooden box sat on the reserved chair with a nameplate. Arthur Lewis and a mechanical pencil laid across the top like a baton. The sight tilted her. She chose the truth of it. The man who met me at the library door with problems I thought were impossible, she said, taught me how not to lie to myself about difficulty. Mr. Lewis died this winter. A rustle. Soft. He left a letter that said, make rooms where I don't have to stand at the door. So that's what we are doing. The Johnson clause. The lab nights. The new chair who doesn't confuse cruelty with rigor. She nodded toward Mr. Nguyen, whose smile was a brief, unguarded thing. An unexpected hush fell, the kind that invites a twist. She gave them one they could use. Tonight, she said, we're launching the Arthur Lewis Fellowship, a yearly award for a student counseled realistically away from excellence. It's not charity, it's a promise. The first fellow is a kid who was told last fall that calculus wasn't where she shines. She beckoned. From the second row, a tiny girl in a too-big gown stood, cheeks wet and radiant. Nia Alvarez, Amara said, voice warm. The gym erupted, not noisy but Nia crossed the stage like someone who had been practicing a stride in her unfriendly mirror. Amara placed a small, weighty envelope in her hand. We'll see you at lab on Thursday, she murmured. Nia nodded like an oath. She returned to the mic. Here's the thing, no one says out loud. She continued. Some rooms are designed to make you disappear. They don't need to say the quiet part out loud. The policy will do it with a smile. Your job isn't to be angry forever. Your job is to be stubborn enough to stay. She didn't look at him, but she felt Parker somewhere in the back, older and thinner, in humility, running the after-school bridge class he started with Mr. Nguyen. He had sent her a message yesterday that simply read, I tell them to look for the sign before they integrate. It was the closest thing to a confession she needed. She changed rhythm, lighter. People will tell you to be realistic, she said, dialing the phrase so everyone could hear it for what it was. Sometimes they mean, I can't imagine it for you, so don't make me try. Imagination isn't their gift to withhold. It's your muscle to build. She told them about the first time she saw her name in a footnote. Bounded correction. A. Johnson. How it felt both too big and exactly right. She told them about the day a ninth grader came to lab, with a Be Realistic slip folded into a paper plane, and launched it into the trash, then stayed until closing to fight a proof into honesty. I keep that plane on my desk, she said. It reminds me that we are permitted to turn someone else's limit into our toy. Will you fail? She asked plainly. Yes. Often. The point isn't to avoid it. It's to get good at learning while you fail, so that other people's delight in your mistakes can't touch the part of you that is still building. She leaned forward, lowering her voice just enough to make the microphone do the leaning for her. And when they move the measuring stick, as they did for me, you move the room. She paused. The gym settled deeper into itself. In the back, the custodian stood, arms crossed, listening. Denise breathed out through a smile that needed no witness. For the record, she added, I did not forgive the sentence your kind don't do math. Forgiveness wasn't the job. The job was to make it sound ridiculous. The long beat. Then the twist that was not decorative but structural. This stage will carry more of you than it used to, she said. But it still won't carry all of you if we aren't careful. So I'm asking the district to adopt one more change. A standing student seat on the curriculum council. She turned to the board clustered by the sidewall. You said you wanted us to advise you. Take the advice like it matters. Put a chair for the kid who's told they're asking too many questions. Let them ask anyway.
Ms. Reeves, hands clasped, nodded once. It was small and it was public.
Amara exhaled. She could feel the ending approach. The place in a proof where the last line is not triumph, but clarity. She thought of the library light, the gym microphone, the headsets in Houston, the day a correction made a blue line hold, instead of fly to pieces. She thought of the freshman who had looked at her like a story, and of the 8th grader who had turned advice into a paper plane. She reached into her folder and unfolded a single brittle flyer from another time. Statewide mathematics competition. Registration open. Edges yellow with the dust of her beginning. She held it up for a second, and then set it on the podium like an altar. I started with this, she said. A piece of paper that thought it knew how my story would go. Papers don't get to decide. She looked out over the sea of white gowns, and anxious eyes, and hands that would soon reach for diplomas and handles, and steering wheels, and someone else's limits. The room drew closer, the way rooms do when they recognize themselves inside one voice. Her eyes burned, and she didn't blink it back. They told me my kind don't do math, she said softly. The sentence finally emptied of power. I chose to believe something louder. She let the silence hold for a breath, then another, and then she leaned into the microphone, with the smallest smile, the kind that warns and blesses at the same time. So tell me, what will they say about your kind when you prove them wrong? No one should ever be told their dreams don't belong to them. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Let your voice count. Type yes if you believe in justice. And subscribe if this broke your heart.